Chapter 601, Wanda Still Single, Second Update. Lucian was the first to raise his hand in agreement. A tense silence followed, until the others, each haunted by their own experiences of human persecution and grateful for the safety Professor Xavier's school had offered them, joined in by raising their hands as well. Their unanimous vote was all but assured. Professor X gave a knowing nod. Very well. Here's the next phase of our plan. We'll use the Xavier family fortune to purchase and develop an uninhabited island as the sovereign territory of our mutant empire. Once construction is complete, I'll activate Cerebro's communication network to notify the presidents of every nation of our formal founding. After securing their recognition, we will announce our empire publicly and extend an invitation to all mutants to unite under our banner. As the meeting broke up, Lucian fell into step beside Quicksilver. "How did your conversation go?" he asked quietly. Quicksilver exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "We spoke," he said with a weary sigh. He apologized, said he's ready to start taking responsibility as a father. Chapter 12. Pietro paused, gazing out over the courtyard as the afternoon light fell in long shafts across the tile. After a moment, he spoke quietly. "The truth is, I can't lay all the blame on Magneto," he said. "Mom met him only once, at a bar. It was a single, careless night. She didn't know she was pregnant until later, but she refused to terminate the pregnancy. She carried us both to term." He turned back to face Lucian. Back then, Magneto was consumed by his quest for vengeance against the Black King. He had no idea my mother had given birth to twins. If he'd known, he never would have walked away. I don't expect him to become the father I never had. I just wanted one. Lucian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "So what will you do now?" Pietro considered for a moment. "Professor Xavier wants to form an X-Men defense squad to protect the mutant empire. I'm not cut out to be an instructor, so I plan to enlist instead. But first, I have to tell Mom everything. About Dad, about Wanda. She deserves to know the truth." Lucian smiled in sympathy. "You're right. After all, your sister grew up to become an elementary school teacher. Maybe teaching isn't the only way to help, but look how far you've come." He rose and offered Pietro his hand. "Whatever you decide, you have my support." Pietro clasped Lucian's hand and nodded. The weight of the past still pressed on him, but with allies by his side and the promise of truth finally revealed, he felt ready to face what came next. Lucian closed his eyes for a moment, thinking it through. That way, Wanda won't have to worry about accidentally revealing her powers in public, and she won't feel so insecure about them, he said. I can also help her stabilize that chaos magic she carries. He'd suggested inviting the Scarlet Witch to teach at Xavier's Institute, both to support her and, admittedly, to access the raw magic in her bloodstream, much the way Jean once did. Pietro's eyes lit up. "That makes perfect sense," he said, practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. "With Aunt Wanda at school, Mom won't worry about me causing a scene every time I zoom off." Before Lucian could warn him, Pietro threw an arm around his shoulders and squeezed. "You free right now? Come see my place." "Sure," Lucian replied, returning the grin. Pietro reached out as if to steady Lucian's neck, just in case he sprinted off so fast he'd snap it. Lucian gently raised a hand. "No need. Remember the teleport mark I left on you? Once you get there, I'll just blink in beside you." "Like Nightcrawler?" Pietro grinned. "Exactly." Lucian shrugged modestly. "All my other powers are small, supportive stuff, really." "Even better." Pietro gave a confident thumbs up, then vanished in a silver blur, instantly streaking toward home. Lucian vanished in a blink of light. Moments later, Pietro Maximoff, Quicksilver, came to a smooth stop at the wrought iron gate of his family's estate in Florida. He glanced around, then turned just in time to see Lucian materialize behind him, as if stepping through thin air. "Nice teleport," Pietro said with a grin. "But you still can't outrun me. Now listen, I need you to go fetch Wanda. Convincing my mother to let me join the Guardians is going to take some serious talking." Lucian inclined his head. "Which campus is she on?" "Doesn't matter," Pietro replied. "Once you find her, bring her here. I want us alone so we can test the chaos magic she carries. It isn't like Jean's Phoenix Force. It has its own consciousness. I'm not sure if absorbing it will draw Chthon's attention. Then again, I'm not overly worried. Chthon may be a multiversal demon god, but he never dares show his true form. He operates through proxies, Wanda being one of them, or he seduces mortals with dark tomes. Worst case scenario, we might feel a sliver of his power, but nothing beyond single universe scale. Lucian gave a quick nod, phased out, and was gone before Pietro could blink. With that, Pietro steeled himself for the conversation ahead, both with his mother and, soon enough, with Wanda herself. Montauk Elementary School sat exactly 6 kilometers straight down this road. In the blink of an eye, Pietro slipped into the house. Pulling out his phone, he dialed his sister. "Wanda, listen, my friend Lucian is coming to pick you up later. He's the one I told you about. I need to talk to you urgently." On the other end, Wanda's voice crackled with irritation. "Pietro, where have you been the last 2 days? I already told you I'm not at school today. I took the day off for a class reunion." Pietro winced. He knew how exasperating his last-minute messages could be, but there was no time to explain. He dashed back outside, only to find Lucian gone. No matter. Pietro trusted Lucian's uncanny knack for tracking people. If anyone could find Wanda, it was him. "It's fine," Pietro muttered into the phone. "Lucian will find you. The important thing is I found our biological father. He wants to meet you. Mom is back now too, so we'll figure everything out when you get home. I'll talk to her first, okay?" He ended the call before Wanda could protest. Pocketing his phone, he headed toward his mother, an anxious mix of relief and anticipation stirring in him. Inside, Wanda paused at her dressing room mirror, still wearing that red dress she'd picked for the reunion. Pietro's news rang in her ears. Their father, and a mysterious friend named Lucian. She pressed a hand to her chest, uncertain whether her heart was racing from anger at Pietro's irresponsibility, excitement at the prospect of meeting her father, or curiosity about this Lucian who could locate anyone at will. All she knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. Wanda had never known who her biological father was, and she certainly hadn't expected her unreliable brother Pietro to actually track him down. Now Pietro's friend was on his way to her location. She swore under her breath. She'd never told Pietro where she was staying. How had he found out? Grabbing her phone, she decided, "Forget this reunion. I need to take a taxi and figure out what's going on." A high school reunion paled in importance next to discovering her father's identity. Besides, the reunion had lost any real appeal. If she weren't worried about hurting people's feelings, she wouldn't have shown up at all. In school, she'd been something of a wallflower, but today, her striking looks and poised figure made her impossible to ignore. The male classmates hadn't stopped staring all evening, and that only stoked the other women's jealousy. They'd spent the night dredging up old gossip to needle her. Wanda tapped the waitress on the shoulder. "Sorry, I have to go," she said, shrugging on her coat. Then she slipped out of the private dining room, snatched her purse off the table, and headed straight for the nearest taxi stand. As Wanda turned to leave, a familiar voice called after her. "Hey, Wanda, what's the hurry? Off to meet your new boyfriend?" Wanda paused, hand on the doorknob, and turned with a sharp look. "Boyfriend?" she snapped. "You really think I have one? Didn't Mike from our class break up with me after one day, calling me a witch and then ditching this whole reunion? How could you forget that so fast?" A petite, brown-haired girl at the snack table laughed and exchanged a grin with the blonde next to her. "Right? It's hilarious," the blonde added, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "Can you blame the poor guy? But seriously, Wanda, you've changed. You're practically glowing now." The two of them tittered as they watched Wanda's face flush. Behind them, many of the male classmates lingered by the doorway, their eyes following Wanda wherever she moved. Once the quiet girl of the group, she'd blossomed into someone strikingly beautiful, and that transformation irked the others even more than their failed teasing. Wanda squared her shoulders, forcing calm. "Well," she said through clenched teeth, "if you'll excuse me, I actually have somewhere to be, unlike some people who apparently came just to gossip." With that, she slipped out into the hallway, leaving the two girls staring after her, mouths agape. "Hi, I'd be happy to help polish the chapter, but I'll need the actual text of the chapter to do so. Could you please paste the full machine-translated draft here? Once I have the content, I can rewrite it into coherent, idiomatic English with Lucian as the male protagonist." Wanda's hand shimmered with a faint red glow, but she swallowed her anger and forced a polite smile. I appreciate your concern, but really, I've got it handled. She stepped toward the door of the private room, ready to slip away. Before she could, a sharply dressed classmate in a floral blazer blocked her path. He didn't sneer. Instead, he adopted an almost gentlemanly air and pointed toward the rain-soaked street visible through the window. It's pouring out there, Wanda. Taxis are nearly impossible to hail in this weather. How about I give you a ride home? No, thanks. Wanda's reply was quick, cool, utterly final. Behind that well-mannered offer lurked the same old motive. He came from one of the wealthiest families at school, and during every hallway conversation, he'd led the chorus of students calling her a freak. Now, he was putting on charm, but Wanda knew better than to fall for it. She faced him squarely, her voice steady. You know, you give people the choice to help you, and then turn them away. If you want to make friends, you can't keep rejecting every kindness. People who stay on the outside become easy targets for gossip and labels. If you don't want to be called a freak, you'd better learn to let people in. With that, she slipped past him and into the night, ignoring the rain and the stares she left behind. Why don't you come over to my place? I'll teach you how to fit in around here. I'm really good at it. The boy in the floral suit reached out and casually swept Lucian's hair aside, his eyes glittering with false charm. Lucian felt a surge of rage, his temples throbbing as if his veins might burst. He ached to use his powers on these jokers and put them in their place, but he held himself back. If anything went wrong, it would only make his family's burden heavier. His mother had raised him and his brother on her own, scraping by for years. She'd finally found someone to marry when Lucian's baby sister was born, but that stepfather died in a tragic accident soon after. His brother was a lost cause, constantly in trouble with the law for petty theft and refusing to hold a steady job. His younger sister, now in the throes of middle school rebellion, only added to the household expenses. If Lucian lost his job by exposing his abilities, his mother would be forced to support them all again. So he clenched his jaw and refused them again. They could mock him some more. That was all they could do. Eventually, they'd get bored and leave him alone. Wanda knew she shouldn't have given in to Haley's pleading and come to this miserable class reunion. Slouching in a corner booth of the restaurant, she kept stealing glances at Haley, who sat beside her with her head bowed and her cheeks reddening with guilt. Haley was one of the few classmates Wanda actually liked, and in all the years since graduation, she'd never set foot in a reunion hall until now. Only Haley's relentless begging had finally worn her down. Now it was clear why. By dragging Wanda into this, Haley had deftly diverted everyone's attention away from herself. If Wanda hadn't shown up, Haley would have been the target of every snide remark and mocking laugh. These people are asking for trouble, Wanda thought, bracing herself for the next round of jabs. High above the restaurant, Lucian hovered unseen. After failing to track Wanda at the school, he'd resorted to divination spells to pinpoint her exact location, and found himself gazing down at the private dining room through a shimmering bubble of magic. From here, he could witness every whispered insult, every tense glare. What set his senses tingling wasn't the petty high school drama below, but the latent power he sensed in Wanda. Beyond her mutant abilities, she possessed something far more dangerous: chaos magic. In old tomes, it was known by a brash nickname, I reckon magic, and for good reason. In the right hands, chaos magic didn't just tweak reality, it rewrote it entirely. Whatever the caster willed into being would come to pass, and if Wanda had mastered even a fraction of that power, Lucian realized nothing in this world, or any other, might stand in her way. In this universe, all it took was Wanda's offhand remark, there shouldn't be mutants here. And 98% of them simply vanished. Even now, though she's consciously suppressing her power, the faintest flicker of malice in her thoughts could doom any surviving classmates to mysterious accidents. After all, as one of the three primal forces, the multiversal energy coursing through her is nothing to take lightly. It's only her lack of complete mastery over the chaos magic within her, and her fundamentally kind nature, free of any truly extreme impulses, that has kept disaster at bay. Wanda exhales, half to herself, half in determination. All right, better start earning some goodwill. In an instant, Lucian appears before the door of the private room. His casual attire ripples like living fabric and transforms into a sleek, custom-tailored suit not unlike Tony Stark's, right down to the matching designer watch. Sure, saving a damsel in distress is a classic move, but it's undeniably effective at winning her affection. A girl who's never been in love might even throw herself at her rescuer. Of course, you have to look the part. Otherwise, I promise you everything comes off less like a vow and more like a line in someone's posthumous will. Lucian's goal was clear. He needed to consume the chaos magic swirling inside Wanda, just as he had done with Jean. The deeper her trust in him, the less her resistance would be, and the more easily he could draw out her power. If fate didn't hand him a perfect opportunity, he'd manufacture one. Saving a distressed damsel was just one convenient way to earn her confidence. Countless others lay waiting. He pushed open the door to the private room and strode in. Wanda froze in surprise. Silently, Lucian closed the distance, took her small hand in his, and spoke in a low, reassuring voice. I told you it was raining today, so I wanted to come get you myself, but you insisted on taking a taxi, worried it would be too showy and embarrass your classmates. Honestly, they're not so petty. Wanda's lips parted, as if to protest, but Lucian turned smoothly and extended his free hand to the young man in the floral suit standing beside her. His smile was warm, disarming, exactly the kind of gesture that convinced people he cared more about their comfort than their power. And Wanda, still reeling, was dangerously close to believing him entirely. Lucian stepped forward just as the last bell rang, looping an arm through Wanda's. Before she could summon any protests, he gave the room a warm, confident smile. Hello, everyone. I'm Wanda's boyfriend, Lucian. A hush fell over the classroom. Bob, Wanda's classmate, clad in a crisp floral blazer, stared Lucian up and down, his pupils narrowing. Then, in an instant, his features relaxed into an affable grin. Pleasure to meet you, Bob said, extending his hand. I'm Bob. Bob's family was well off, and he prided himself on his instincts. There was nothing ordinary about the man standing next to Wanda. From the way his tailored suit hugged broad shoulders to the gleaming timepiece on his wrist, surely more valuable than Bob's flashiest sports car, Lucian radiated quiet power. Bob knew better than to underestimate him. Around the room, whispers and glances flew. Some students eyed Lucian with thinly veiled suspicion. Others felt a twinge of envy or outright jealousy. Who would have guessed that Wanda Moretti, the girl they'd always thought of as eccentric, could attract someone so handsome, so evidently well-connected? As Bob and Lucian shook hands, a sudden, piercing scream cut through the air, freezing everyone in their tracks. Lucian yanked his hand free the moment a sharp twinge shot through his palm. In doing so, he lost his balance and stumbled backward into the small table behind him. The impact sent it crashing over, and in an instant wine glasses spun through the air while plates of food scattered in every direction, landing squarely on the heads of his equally stunned classmates. Sorry, everyone, Lucian said, brushing his hand casually on his jeans. I've been hitting the gym lately and clearly didn't hold back. He turned toward Wanda and gave her a crooked grin. Ready to go? Your brother's waiting for us at home. Wanda couldn't help but laugh as she surveyed the mess and the wide-eyed looks of their drenched friends. Thanks, Lucian, she said, looping her arm through his. Together, they stepped out of the private room, leaving behind overturned dishes and a very memorable dinner. Chapter 604, Shortcuts to Claim the Power of Chaos, Part 2. Damn it, don't you dare walk away. Bob scrambled to his feet, clutching his right hand. He was pretty sure he'd broken it. Rage burned in his eyes as he lunged after Lucian and Wanda. He'd heard rumors that Lucian came from a powerful family and didn't want to pick a fight over a girl, but this humiliation, his mangled hand, was more than he could bear. Around him, the other students dusted bits of food from their clothes and hurried out, eager for a closer look. But when they spilled onto the sidewalk in front of the restaurant, they came to an abrupt halt. Bob stood frozen, staring upward in horror, and when the others followed his gaze, their jaws dropped. 6 black helicopters hovered over the building, their underbelly machine guns aimed squarely at the entrance. One wrong move and the restaurant would be shredded in seconds. In the lead chopper, Lucian and Wanda sat side by side, the aircraft lifting them higher into the sky. They peered down at the crowd below, as casually as one might study ants scuttling across a sidewalk. Lucian watched the last of the 6 black helicopters vanish into the horizon before turning back to Wanda. She stared at him with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Who are you, really?" she pressed. "My brother. He's always got some secret scheme going on. When did he make a friend like you? Did he steal state secrets again?" Lucian offered her a calm smile. "No, not at all. I'm just a friend. And those helicopters? They were nothing more than projections from my ability." He raised his hand, and in an instant the image of the choppers dissolved into the sky. Before Wanda could catch her breath, Lucian knelt and scooped her into his arms. In a blink, they were standing on the porch of a modest house. He set her down gently and rang the bell. "Relax," he said as he crossed his arms. "We're all on the same team here." Wanda glanced around, still trying to process how they'd arrived. "Same team?" "Yes," Lucian replied. "Mutants, just like you've seen in the news. I teach at the Mutant Academy, and your brother is on their security detail. Those helicopters were sent by a government agency that didn't realize what they were up against." Wanda's eyes widened. A slow understanding dawned on her face as the jigsaw pieces fell into place. "So you really are my brother's friend?" Lucian nodded. "And now you understand why I came." Wanda drew in a deep breath, the tension easing from her shoulders. "All right," she said softly. "Lead the way." "Pietro actually helped save the world." Wanda stared at her brother in disbelief. In her mind, Pietro was nothing more than a troublemaker, an expert at shoplifting, and a constant headache for the family. She never imagined he'd be rubbing elbows with major players or that he'd taken part in a globe-saving mission in Cairo just last night. The doorbell chimed, and in a blur of silver hair, Pietro was already at the door, grinning as he swung it open. "Afternoon, sis," he said casually. Wanda followed him inside. Today's agenda: a Maximoff family meeting. Tension crackled through the living room as their mother, Pietro, and Wanda hashed out the future. At stake was whether Pietro and Wanda would join the Mutant Empire and work under their father, Magneto. After what felt like hours of debate, their mother finally gave in. First, she reasoned she couldn't keep her children from their own father forever. Magneto was still their parent, after all. And second, life among ordinary humans was proving impossible for both Pietro and Wanda. Torn between hiding in basements and living in fear, their mutant powers made it impossible to blend in. Pietro especially had felt the sting of isolation. He spent most days holed up in the basement, escaping into video games. When boredom struck, he'd sneak out to lift small items from convenience stores, his only excitement in an otherwise lonely existence. Over time, he'd become a certified loser, too shy even to ask a girl on a date. But that was all about to change. With their mother's reluctant blessing, Pietro and Wanda would soon set out to build a new life, side by side with Magneto and the Mutant Empire. Wanda had tried settling into life as an elementary school teacher, but her unstable powers and simmering anxieties made the classroom a daily struggle. She was too frightened of losing control to form any close relationships, and that included romance. Most days, she simply endured her fears for her family's sake, keeping her head down and her emotions bottled up. Pietro understood her all too well. Both siblings longed for a place where they could be themselves without shame or restraint, somewhere their mutations wouldn't be viewed as a curse, but as a gift. The Mutant Empire offered exactly that, a society of their own kind, where they could finally live freely and discover their true purpose. And best of all, they wouldn't be separated. "Let's do this," Pietro said, determination shining in his eyes. With that, they packed their belongings and said farewell to their mother and younger sister. Waiting for them at the gates of the secret academy was Lucian, the driver and guide who would take them home. Together, the three of them departed for the island stronghold of the emerging empire. A month later, on a lightly inhabited island in the Atlantic Ocean, the Mutant Empire officially came into being. From the Citadel's central tower, Professor Charles Xavier activated Cerebro one last time to address the world. To every mutant scattered across this planet, his voice rang out through telepathic channels, reaching millions at once. "You have a home now. The Mutant Empire awaits you. Come and join us." Then, to underscore the Empire's power and resolve, he offered two demonstrations. First, with a mere thought, He lulled the highest-ranking human leaders into a deep, harmless slumber for exactly 1 hour. Next, he shifted the Earth's magnetic field in the blink of an eye, sending a message that the mutant empire would defend its people by any means necessary. As the broadcast ended, Wanda and Pietro stood side by side with Lucian, their hearts brimming with hope. At last, they were free. Chapter 7. Morning Light. Let the world's leaders learn just how devastating the mutant empire really is. Its power dwarfs even nuclear weapons. Naturally, negotiations, alliances, and shadowy plots swirl around every summit table. But those high-stakes games are handled by Professor X and Magneto. My concerns are altogether different. As the Empire's senior mental instructor at the Imperial Academy, I, Lucian, spend my days honing young mutants' psionic gifts and guiding them through their deepest fears. Behind the scenes, I continue a far more perilous endeavor, slowly drawing the raw energies of the Phoenix Force and chaos magic into myself, one careful step at a time. 2 months have passed since I first felt those titanic currents stir within me. This morning, pale dawn light slipped through my curtains, painting my quarters in soft gold. I rose and pulled them aside, letting the sun spill into the room. The warmth felt good, so good that I almost forgot how late I'd kept another night. Lucian. A sleepy voice drifted from beneath the covers. I turned to see Evelyn, her dark hair fanned across the pillows, white arms reaching out blindly as though she were groping for me. When her hand found mine, she tugged insistently, hauling me back onto the mattress. "Come back to bed," she murmured, voice thick with exhaustion. "It's Saturday. No classes today. Sleep a little longer." I sat beside her, smiling at the gentle protest. Yesterday's late-night training session had stretched until dawn, and I could feel her fatigue in every bone. Normally, I'd protest the temptation to snooze, but today I let her press me down, enjoying the rare luxury of doing nothing. "Just 5 more minutes," I teased, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "Promise." Evelyn relaxed against me, and I closed my eyes, letting morning's warmth and her steady heartbeat be the first efforts of my day. Outside, the Empire's intrigues would wait. For now, there was peace in this quiet moment, and that was enough. "You promised," Lucian whispered as he eased under the covers, his dual mastery humming to life. Wanda's fingers clutched the sheets, knuckles white, as she fought to stifle her breaths. He could almost hear her heart pounding, let alone any muffled sounds drifting to the neighbors. I said just sleep, not. It had been 2 months since they first met, and thanks to Lucian's keen mental abilities and that fortunate first impression, Wanda's fondness for him had grown steadily. Back at the school dance, after one too many drinks, they'd stumbled into bed together, and Lucian discovered something extraordinary. Whenever Wanda reached a heightened state of emotional excitement, drawing on her chaos magic became exponentially easier. By excitement, he meant that raw, elemental thrill of body and mind in sync. The longer she stayed there, the simpler it was for him to devour her magic. Since then, whenever the chance arose, Lucian had coaxed Wanda into playful experiments, sampling every wine he could find, sometimes pushing far beyond what ordinary mortals could handle, aided by his own sorcery. Lucian had absorbed far more chaos magic than even the Phoenix Force itself, and, at one point, he'd even considered using the same method on Jean Grey, the Phoenix Girl. But as a teacher at the school, assaulting Jean was unthinkable. Besides, taking on both Jean and Wanda at once would stretch him beyond his limits. Physically, Lucian was unstoppable. His dragon-like constitution let him endure 7 days and nights of strain without pause, and even after 7 years of constant exertion, his vitality remained undiminished. His real obstacle wasn't stamina, however, but assimilation. Ingesting and transmuting 2 such titanic energies into his own essence demanded a careful, time-consuming adaptation. With Jean Grey, Lucian felt nothing but indifference. His true focus, and his unexpected vulnerability, lay with Wanda. Their intimate encounters sparked emotions in him that went far beyond the simple accumulation of chaos magic. Chapter 605. The Plan to Open the Eclipse Gate. Tenru Island, Fairy Tale Realm. Outside a cozy wooden cottage nestled among wind-bent pines, a gentle breeze stirred the treetops as Zareth poured tea into 2 earthenware cups on a low coffee table set before him. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns across the worn wood planks of the porch. Opposite him sat Lucian, his dark hair tousled and eyes bright with curiosity. Zareth lifted his cup, inhaling the fragrant steam before setting it down again. "The Star Spirit world is unlike anything in our own realm," he began, voice low and measured. "Star spirits cannot linger here without a contract binding them to a human master. Likewise, humans who enter the Star Spirit world must don its native attire, or they'll quickly succumb to its energies." He leaned forward, fingers tracing an invisible diagram in the air. "Time flows differently there. One day among the Star Spirits equals 100 days in our world. It's this very distortion that inspired my design for the Eclipse Gate." Lucian nodded, absorbing every word. "So by harnessing that time dilation, the gate can bridge our world and the realm of the Star Spirits, on our terms?" "Precisely," Zareth replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "By channeling the Star Spirit world's temporal flow through a controlled aperture, we can open a passage, briefly, safely, and with full command over its duration. In theory, it should allow us to summon powerful spirits without losing years of our own lives in the process." He paused to take a slow sip of tea, eyes fixed on Lucian's. "But theory and practice often diverge. That's why I've called you here, Lucian. I need a capable mage by my side when we first activate the gate." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine resin and salt from the distant sea. Lucian straightened in his seat, resolve lighting his features. "Then let's make sure this plan succeeds," he said. "Tell me everything I need to know." Zareth closed his eyes, as if gathering his thoughts for the long explanation to come. The forest fell silent around them, bracing itself for the birth of a door between worlds, and the uncertain fate that awaited those who dared to step through. Lucian drifted in thought as Zareth's words echoed in his mind. Without all 12 zodiac keys and the Star Spirit's power at the exact moment of the eclipse, only overwhelming personal strength and flawless time magic could force open an eclipse gate. Reclining on the coffee table, Lucian had already sketched out his daring plan. If he could crack the gate early, he would unleash 10,000 ancient dragons, devour them, and absorb every form of dragon slayer magic. Fire, ice, wind, lightning, and even the forbidden arts, becoming the ultimate dragon slayer mage. It was a bold, almost reckless scheme, but the reward outweighed the risk. The only problem was time. The next official eclipse, and with it, the natural chance to open the gate, was still 5 years away. True, Lucian had aided Lucy in gathering the 12 golden zodiac keys, yet Zareth had made it clear. To force the gate before its appointed hour required power on par with the Star Spirit world, plus an impeccable command of time magic. Lucian's temporal abilities were already impressive. He could manipulate fleeting seconds or stretch minutes into hours. But his raw magical strength, though formidable, still lagged slightly behind what the Star Spirits could muster. He swung his legs off the table and landed lightly on the floor. 5 years, 1,826 days, to bridge the gap. It was a tight schedule, but if anyone could pull it off, it was him. After all, Lucian hadn't reached this level of mastery by settling for good enough. He rose, determination flaring in his eyes. He would deepen his time spells until they were perfect, push his elemental magic until it roared like a storm, and hone every skill he had. When the moment came, the eclipse gate would tremble, and Lucian would be waiting on the other side. Lucian's eyes glittered with determination. Then let's deal with Acnologia and claim the Devour magic first. He'd already ruled out the impossible task of devouring 10,000 dragons to master every type of dragon slayer magic. But Acnologia, the legendary black dragon, held within him the very essence of Devour magic. By absorbing that power, Lucian would dramatically enhance his 6 styles of the Celestial Thief, vastly improving his ability to siphon off the Phoenix Force and the Chaos Force from the Prime Realm. With those forces at his command, his core strength would surge. The gulf separating him from the Eclipse Gate's guardians would shrink, and soon he might bend the gate's seals with nothing but his own power. It was astonishing how far he'd come in under 6 years. Since stepping into the Marvel Universe and awakening his first world avatars, Lucian had transformed from a lowly level 2 mutant clone into a being teetering on the edge of single universe equivalence. At the peak of the Skyfather tier, his raw might now rivaled that of an average universe-level powerhouse. That explosive ascension, powered by the stacked might of his avatars and his relentless drive, had been nothing short of exponential. Now, armed with Acnologia's Devour magic, he was poised for yet another quantum leap. Lucian finally ascended to the pinnacle of the Skyfather tier, and there he hesitated. It wasn't that his cultivation had stalled. His power was still climbing. Yet he had yet to shatter that final barrier into the single-universe realm. By now, he could defeat multiple versions of himself from just a few months ago, proof that he was still improving. Still, he felt a growing impatience, until he faced the truth of the gap before him. When you stand at the apex of Skyfather, the next step isn't a simple upgrade, it's a chasm. It's the difference between mortals and true immortals. Think of the ordinary path. A cultivator begins as a mere mortal, then advances through body refinement, foundation building, the golden core, nascent soul, transformation god, refining the void, harmony with the Tao, and finally transcending the tribulation. Only after surviving that final, devastating trial does one truly become an immortal. Along the way, countless practitioners fall at each stage. By the time you face the heavenly tribulation, only the rarest survive. It is the same from Skyfather to single universe. The strength you possess at the top of Skyfather, even though it dwarfs almost everything you've encountered so far, is still but the threshold of a realm whose power and demands are on an entirely different scale. Lucian relaxed into meditation, letting his senses expand outward, not to push harder, but to understand the nature of the wall before him. Only by comprehending its secrets could he hope to shatter it and step into a universe of his own. At the Skyfather tier, one remains bound within the fabric of a single universe. A mighty being, to be sure, but still a component of that cosmos. Upon reaching the single universe tier, however, you gain the power to transcend your home universe at will. And beyond that lies the realm of true sovereignty, forging your own pocket dimension and ascending as a self-contained lord of creation. Lucian understood that to breach the barrier into the single universe realm, he must cultivate patience above all else. Day after day, he would accumulate power, strengthen his core, and deepen his foundation. Only through such relentless preparation could he shatter the next threshold and complete the metamorphosis of his life essence. He had already devoured Acnologia, absorbed the strength of 10,000 dragons, and consumed both the Phoenix Force and the Chaos Force. He pored over spells from countless worlds, dissecting each school of magic to grasp its true purpose and the laws that underlie every reality. Every conquest, every discovery served the same goal, building the perfect crucible, his own miniature world, within which he could finally break free of all cosmic limits. After all, great accumulation gets great transformation. Zareth, Lucian, come try my latest creation. Before either of them could reply, Mavis burst from the guild house, balancing 2 plates in her outstretched hands. On each plate sat a soft, pillowy mound of dough, its shape promising both mystery and delight. A moment later, old Makarov appeared behind her, cloak trailing a fine dust as he dusted his shoulders. Mavis beamed at her audience. I think you're going to love these. Lucian exchanged a glance with Zareth, curiosity lighting his eyes. This was but one of many small moments in his long journey, but sometimes, he reflected, progress tasted sweetest when served in a simple, homemade snack. Lucian paused at the door and gave Mavis a quick nod. I still have business at the guild, so I'll be going ahead. The instant those words left his lips, his expression flickered. With a faint crackle of mana, he vanished, leaving only Zareth behind, his face as green as a freshly melted potion. Mavis sighed and surveyed the chaos in her kitchen. When it came to magic, she was nothing short of brilliant, but cooking? That was a different story. She loved inventing new spells almost as much as she loved experimenting on brand new dishes and snacks. Unfortunately, most of her culinary creations turned out worse than inedible. They were legendary failures, destined to be scrapped. Over the years, Mavis's ambitious recipes had joined the long list of dishes abandoned by chefs who'd come before her. Oddly enough, since sharing a home with Mavis, Zareth noticed his own temper had softened. He found himself murmuring curses far less often, perhaps because he was too busy dodging the next kitchen catastrophe. Back at Fairy Tales Guildhall, Mira-Jane was the first to welcome him. "Guildmaster, you're back!" she exclaimed, sweeping around the table to greet him. Lucian arrived in his feline form, then seamlessly shifted into his human shape, gathering her into his arms and planting a soft kiss on her forehead. Mirajane's cheeks flushed. "Anything new happened today?" Lucian smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Nothing I couldn't handle," he said, "but I want to hear your news first." After all, everyone carried desires in their hearts, and no matter how much one devoted oneself to magic, emotions had a way of blossoming when you least expected them. Lucian's consciousness was singular, yet spread across multiple bodies, his true form and a host of avatars, all sharing the same thoughts and sensations. Controlling so many vessels could be distracting, but the experience was never hollow. Whatever pleasure one body felt, they all felt. Lucian himself never made the first move in matters of the heart, but that didn't stop others from pursuing him. As guild master, he'd guided the company through one crisis after another. His calm wisdom and undeniable power naturally drew the admiration of countless female mages. If he'd remained in his familiar cat form, the attention might have been easier to bear. But Lucian had perfected the art of transformation, often walking and laughing among his peers as a man. Over time, it was Mirajane, who saw him more than anyone else, who quietly fell in love. When she one evening wrapped her arms around him, he realized he wasn't made of stone, and soon they became inseparable. "Lucian," Mirajane said, her brow knit with worry as she stepped back and released his hand. "Natsu and the others accidentally destroyed half of Agalifa City on their last S-class mission." He paused, absorbing the news. Mirajane hurried on. "We've dispatched several repair mages from the guild. They estimate it'll take just over 2 weeks to rebuild." Lucian's eyes hardened with resolve. 2 weeks is too long. I'm going to see it for myself. Leave preparations to me. He turned on his heel, already planning his departure. Mirajane nodded, both relief and admiration shining in her gaze. Whatever dangers lay ahead, she knew her guildmaster, and her partner would face them head-on. In just over 2 weeks, the Magic Council will probably file another formal complaint. Lucian pressed a hand against his forehead. "They're hopeless when it comes to helping me track down rare spellbooks, but when it comes to stirring up trouble, they're absolute experts." Chapter 606, Fighting the Black Dragon, Second Update. Lucian leaned back in his chair, surveying the bustling activity in Fairy Tale's Grand Hall. Under his leadership, the guild had ascended to become the most powerful mage organization on the continent of Ishgard. Its ranks now included dozens of elite wizards, and its alliance with the Alvarez Empire to the west was stronger than ever. Even the Magic Council dared not openly challenge them. At most, they'd issue formal complaints. As long as Lucian chose to ignore those missives, the council lacked both the will and authority to reinstate the harsh sanctions of old. Still, Lucian wasn't unreasonable. He acknowledged that the recent missteps by some guild members were genuine mistakes. Rather than punish them, he sent in his restoration magic specialists to remedy the damage swiftly and discreetly. His original dream had been modest. Elevate Fairy Tale to unrivaled strength, then settle into the president's chair and pore over countless spellbooks. Yet his ambitions had far outgrown that vision. Through lengthy exchanges of arcane theory with Zeref and Mavis, and by acquiring magical tomes from across the entire Western continent, Lucian had effectively amassed 90% of the world's known magic. Now, as Fairy Tale prepared to confront the legendary Black Dragon, he felt more confident than ever. No matter how fearsome the foe, under his command, the guild would stand triumphant. Lucian surveyed the guild hall with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Since his arrival, he had absorbed nearly every spell the Fairy Tale mages could muster, save for a handful of highly specialized arcane secrets. Meanwhile, the day-to-day errands, repairs, and back-office chores had piled up faster than anyone could keep track. With inspirational figures like Natsu, Gray, and Urza blazing the path, new recruits learned fast, and, just as predictably, managed to wreak equal measures of havoc. Rumor had it that Lucian intended to return the office of Guildmaster to the venerable Makarov once Acnologia was safely dealt with. The old man deserved a rest, and Lucian could hardly bear another round of clearing up after Makarov's endless good intentions. But before he abdicated his post, someone reliable needed to handle logistics, someone who could shield Makarov from every late-night summons. With that thought in mind, Lucian vanished from the guild, reappearing at the devastated edge of Agalia City in a golden flash. He raised his staff and chanted under his breath, "Restore." A gentle hum radiated outward, and the shattered buildings, smoldering rubble, and cracked streets began to heal, piece by piece, until the city stood exactly as it had before. Yet Lucian did not linger. From the corner of his eye, he drew a fine rune in the air. Direction Manifestation, Ultir. A faint marker shimmered in midair, pulsing toward the south. Ultir Milkovich would be perfect. She had the organizational mind to manage guild affairs and the diplomacy to shield Makarov from every little crisis, as well as the spine to stand up to him when he inevitably tried to slip back behind the counter. Satisfied, Lucian vanished once more, leaving Agalia City restored and a clear course set. First, secure Ultir's cooperation. Then, deliver the presidency back to Makarov, once and for all. Lucian surveyed the situation with a critical eye. The few mages in his guild who were learning restoration magic could patch up minor damage, but anything larger was beyond their skill. He needed someone with a deeper mastery of time itself. Ultir, former mage of Grimoire Heart and inheritor of the Lost Ark of Time, fit the bill perfectly. While she'd never studied traditional restoration spells, her time magic could reverse decay just as effectively. If she learned Lucian's specialized techniques, she wouldn't match his raw power, but it would be more than enough. After all, no matter how much destruction Natsu and his friends caused, they couldn't sink an entire continent, right? A glowing golden arrow streaked across the sky, Lucian's custom detection spell. As it flew, he supplemented it with a mental scan that honed in on Ultir's precise location. In moments, he had her, the southernmost tip of the eastern continent. Below him, Ultir and her adopted daughter, Meredy, were locked in battle against a shadowy dark guild cell. Ever since the turmoil on Tenru Island, Ultir and Meredy had buried their old grudges, abandoned Grimoire Heart, and taken up the mantle of wandering champions, punishing evil wherever they found it to atone for past sins. Ultir's voice rang out, crystal clear. God's radiance. In an instant, dozens of translucent orbs, snatched from possible futures, materialized overhead. Each orb shone like a miniature sun, then flared outward in 1,000 dazzling beams. The dark mages before them didn't stand a chance. One moment they charged, the next they lay sprawled and defeated in the blinding radiance. Lucian watched from above, satisfaction flickering in his expression. Ultir was exactly the ally he needed. Now the real challenge could begin. Sinray, Meredy cried out, unleashing her McGuilty sense magic. A wave of guilt-charged energy washed over the battlefield, obliterating the last of the dark mages. At that very moment, a figure hurtled from the sky. There's still someone alive! Ultir and Meredy spun toward the newcomer, certain he was another dark guild operative. They unleashed their most powerful spells, only to see the magic fizzle harmlessly in midair. The man lifted a hand, activating his spirit-body source stream and effortlessly dispelling their attacks. "Hold off," he said calmly. "I'm not part of that guild. I'm Lucian, master of the Fairy Tale Guild." With a single gesture, Lucian reverted to his cat form. Ultir froze. "It really is you." She'd seen that same cat before, back when she was undercover in the Magic Council, and observed Lucian overseeing the restoration of Clovertown. Still, it made no sense that the continent's strongest guild master would appear here. Lucian wasted no time in explaining his purpose. Lucian stepped forward, his expression earnest. "I came here specifically to find both of you. I want to invite you to join Fairy Tale." Ultir and Meredy froze. After a moment, Ultir recovered first, shaking her head. "Invite us? President Lucian, Gray must have already told you about our past. We desperately want to atone openly by joining a legitimate guild, but the Magic Council still has active warrants out on us. If we enter Fairy Tale, we'll only bring more trouble down on everyone's heads." A confident smile spread across Lucian's face. He lifted his hand, playfully flicking it like a feline paw, and said, "Trust me, I'll handle the council. With my connections, clearing your names will be a matter of course. Once you're official Fairy Tale members, you can take on missions just like any other guild mage and leave all that darkness behind." Ultir and Meredy exchanged a long look. Their offenses, though serious, weren't irredeemable crimes, and the First Magic Council had been dissolved years ago. With Lucian's guarantee, they realized the path to redemption lay right in front of them. At last, they nodded in unison. Smiling, the three of them set off together for the fairy tale guild hall, Ultier and Merity ready to embrace their new lives as lawful, open mages. After securing everything he needed, Lucian slipped out of the fairy tale guild without a word and set out alone to confront Acnologia. He hadn't told anyone. There was simply no point. Acnologia's devour magic would nullify every other spell, even Zeref's. Bringing allies would only slow him down, so he resolved to face the Dragon King by himself. Lucian's confidence in his own strength was absolute. Had his foe been Anxarum, the so-called god of death, he might have hesitated. The ancient grimoires he'd collected suggested that Anxarum was more than a mere death deity. He could very well be the creator of this world. Yet every time he appeared, he took mortal lives and unleashed curses, earning him a reputation as a grim reaper. Still, none of that deterred Lucian. He thought of the vast, interwoven realms of fairy tale, parallel worlds governed by perfect laws, teeming with mages, magical beasts, and even the celestial spirit world, and reminded himself that this final battle was his destiny alone. With resolve burning in his chest, he vanished into the night, ready to face Acnologia and decide the fate of all. In theory, this death god already ranks at the multi-universe tier. Its weakest form still outclasses the peak power of any single universe champion. By comparison, Acnologia barely qualifies as a Skyfather in his own right, and that status rests largely on the sheer force of his devour magic. Faced with such foes, Lucian has little to fear. Chapter 607, Gate of Hades, first update. This is pointing straight at the Magic Council's district. Lucian frowned at the glowing sigils dancing above his palm. He'd cast the Locate Person spell to track the Black Dragon, and the magic circle now pulsed toward the heart of the city, home to the Magic Council's headquarters. That struck him as odd. When he first pinpointed the dragon, its lair had been a deserted isle far out at sea, its chosen resting place for centuries. Like all ancient dragons, it slept almost constantly, stirring only when it sensed a surge of draconic power. If it wasn't back on that island, it meant it had awakened and gone somewhere else. Could Natsu and the others be involved? He had almost forgotten Mirajane's warning. When he'd last left the guild, she'd mentioned that Natsu, Urza, and the rest had accepted an S-class mission directly from a member of the Magic Council. The assignment was to root out demons covertly embedded within the Council's ranks. Lucian hadn't paid it much mind back then. After all, nearly every demon in this world was a creation of Zeref, and their magic was far beyond a regular mage's reach. Now, though, everything clicked into place. If the demons had provoked the Black Dragon, or somehow dragged it into the city's underbelly, Lucian knew he couldn't ignore this. He slipped the spell into repose, tucking his staff beneath his arm. The city gates lay ahead, and somewhere in its labyrinthine streets, a confrontation was brewing, one that might tear open the very gates of Hades itself. For Natsu and the others today, this kind of threat shouldn't be too hard to handle. They've completed countless missions since they teamed up, their powers have grown dramatically, and they've got an array of magical implements at their disposal. Yet these demons, they're far stronger than anything they've faced before, and there's more than one of them. Their battle was so violent it stirred the sleeping Black Dragon from its rest. 30 minutes ago, at the Magic Council headquarters, a deafening explosion rent the sky, nearly flattening the entire complex. The townspeople fled at once when they saw the devastation, and the council's guards now lie strewn across the courtyard, unconscious. Fairy Tale, Mardgeir of Tartaros scoffed, surveying Urza, Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and Wendy as they crouched among the ruins, chests heaving. Is that really the extent of your power? Behind him stood 9 figures whose magical presence was nothing short of terrifying, demons, each one threatening in its own right. They really are the last remnants of the Balam Alliance and the most fearsome dark guild in history, Tartaros. Of their 10 members, only Silver was ever human, now utterly under the sway of the demon necromancy. The other 9 are pure demons, wrought into existence by Zeref himself. Their scheme was simple, if diabolical. Infiltrate the Magic Council and seize the key that controls Face, the continent-wide magical pulse bomb. Face is an ancient white legacy, dispersed in fragments across the eastern continent and safeguarded by the Council alongside its barrier particles. Once activated, it eradicates every ounce of mana above the eastern continent, leaving every mage powerless. Why such devastation? Because Tartaros intends to use Face's power to resurrect End, the ultimate flame demon recorded in Zeref's Book of Demons, and then unleash him to assassinate Zeref. After all, every member of Tartaros was created for that single purpose, to kill their own creator. Their plot nearly succeeded without a hitch, until a counselor's call for aid brought a squad of fairy tale mages into the fray. Forced out of the shadows, Tartaros abandoned subtlety and struck at the Council's vault with brutal efficiency. In the end, they prevailed. The Face activation key is now theirs. With it in hand, their apocalyptic gambit can move to its next, deadlier phase. Lucian scanned the battlefield, his heart pounding as he took in the scattered dust and shattered stones. As long as he and his allies, hold off these fairy tale mages, Face could be activated, and their plan would be complete. Mardgeir's cold voice cut through the chaos. "You have no shame," he sneered. "If you're so brave, why don't you stop meddling with our teleportation device?" Perched atop Natsu's shoulder, Happy brandished his bonefish club. "Ha! Like we'd ever let you keep that key," he cried. "With it, we could summon our entire guild." Lucy stepped forward, fists on her hips, her eyes blazing. "Calling yourself king of the underworld and shaking in your boots? Give me a break. You're nothing but a coward." Lucian glanced at the ruined gate key lying at his feet. Had Tartaros's demons not sabotaged it in secret, the entire fairy tale guild would already be here. But in its current state, the key was useless. 5 of them against 10 enemy mages was already a desperate fight. If all 10 attackers struck at once, they'd be overwhelmed before they even knew what hit them. Mardgeir's pale brow lifted in amusement. "The game nears its end," he whispered. "It's time to finish this." Lucian stood before his 9 lieutenants, his voice cold and commanding. "Franmalth, activate the face spell. The rest of you, strike together. Leave no one alive." He'd never truly feared the old fairy tale guild. At most, he had respected their reputation. But this new fairy tale was different. They'd gathered the strongest mages from across the eastern continent, and their guildmaster, Lucian, possessed power beyond measure. Even he wasn't certain he could overcome such strength in a straight fight. The moment he learned Fairy Tale had intervened in his plans, he destroyed their unique teleportation relic to prevent reinforcements. For years, he'd tracked the guild's growth and collected every scrap of intelligence he could find. Now, failure was not an option. "Right away, sir." At his signal, the arrogant demons surged forward, encircling Urza, Natsu, and the others. But these guildmates were no longer the novices they once were. Urza's armor gleamed with enhanced fortitude, Natsu's blazing aura crackled with raw power, and Lucy, having claimed all 12 Zodiac keys, had finally ascended to S-class rank. The battlefield was set, and neither side would yield without a fight. Lucian had outfitted them with specially crafted magical implements, reinforced armor, enchanted weapons, arcane talismans, all fine-tuned by his own hand. With these advantages, the 5 mages of Fairy Tale had staked their reputation on being among the strongest on the eastern continent. Yet nothing could have prepared them for what lay before them. Not a single demon, but a battalion of 8, each reinforced by unnatural curses. First among them was Kyoka of the 9 demon gates, whose power stripped her enemies of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell, amplifying their agony even as she grew stronger with every suffering heart. Torafuzar of the underworld followed, cloaking the battlefield in a torrent of venomous black water that corroded flesh and steel alike, his own form rendered all but indestructible. Selah, another gatekeeper, wielded the command curse. One whispered word from her lips could bend any human will, turning companion against companion as bodies moved blindly to obey her cruel orders. These 3 alone would have been more than a match for an ordinary squad, but 6 more lurked beyond, each born of Zeref's own dark experiments and designed for a single purpose, to kill him. As the 5 mages of Fairy Tale fell one by one, bruised, bloodied, and teetering on the brink of defeat, the ominous glow of the face spell began to flare. It was their last line of defense, but it would not save them in time. That was when the sky split with a crack of thunder. a bolt of pure lightning arced downward, illuminating the battlefield in a searing blaze of white light. And in its wake, 4 figures descended, radiant, formidable, and ready to turn the tide. Laxus and the Thunder God tribe, who had been on a mission just outside town, arrived on the scene in the nick of time. In fact, when the battle first erupted, they could easily have razed the Magic Council's headquarters to the ground. But Natsu had deliberately engineered that massive blast. He needed a spectacle of raw power, a magical shockwave to signal all nearby guildmates for reinforcements. He remembered that several of them were scattered around town on other missions, and this was his way of drawing them in. Within moments, Laxus and his entourage charged into the fray, and almost as quickly, Gajeel, Juvia, and more of their friends poured through the smoke and debris. Their arrival shifted the momentum once again in favor of the guild. Just when it seemed the tide would carry them to victory, Mardgeir himself stepped forward and unleashed a devastating counterstrike, reasserting control over the battlefield. As both sides fought with desperate intensity, the countdown on the face bomb ticked ever closer to 0, less than 5 minutes remained. Then, slicing through the chaos like a living storm, the black dragon Acnologia descended, casting an enormous shadow over every combatant below. Chapter 608, You Can Be Immune to Magic, and So Can I, Second Update. Lucian's senses hummed with recognition before his eyes even opened. That unmistakable signature of the Black Dragon King, he had tracked it across dimensions. With a breath, he vanished from where he stood and reappeared above the smoldering ruins of the Magic Council's headquarters. The courtyard below was a study in chaos. Shattered marble pillars lay strewn like toothpicks, and walls that once bore the council's proud insignias were now blackened husks. At the center of the devastation, the Fire Dragon King had erupted from Natsu's body, its molten scales glowing with searing intensity. It lunged at the Black Dragon King with fiery claws and a roar like an erupting volcano, but the ebony behemoth met each attack with disdain, unfazed. Around the perimeter, Natsu and his allies battled 9 demons, each fiend more grotesque than the last. The air crackled with black magic as claws and fangs tore through the charged atmosphere. Lucian hovered a dozen feet above the fray, studying every movement. Even the Fire Dragon King can't handle that menace, he muttered. A crooked smile formed beneath his whiskers. Excellent. Once I've swallowed the Black Dragon King, I'll corral these demons and deliver them to Mira-Jane. She's due for some fresh playthings for her takeover magic. With a deliberate motion, he stroked the fine whiskers around his muzzle. Then, casting aside every pretense of restraint, he unleashed his full power. A tidal wave of arcane energy, far surpassing anything he had ever revealed, burst forth. The ground trembled. Trees bent as if caught in a hurricane. Even the ruined pillars groaned under the onslaught. A palpable shockwave rolled outward, rearranging the battlefield with uncanny force. Magical barriers flickered, spells stuttered and died, and every combatant, friend or foe, felt the gravity of true power for the first time. Lucian landed lightly at the ruin's edge, eyes blazing. He had arrived, and now the entire world would bend or shatter before him. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolling like a war drum. Dark clouds massed overhead, blotting out the sun, while a ferocious gale swept across the battlefield. Even from miles away, daylight was swallowed whole. Any onlooker would have sworn it was the end of the world. Such overwhelming magic, such a cataclysmic spectacle, froze every combatant in their tracks. On one flank, the Fire Dragon King fell back alongside Natsu and the rest of the fairy tale wizards, forming a cautious line. Facing them, the 9 fiends of Tartaros hesitated, unwilling to press forward. Above them all, the Black Dragon King descended, his immense form briefly eclipsing the clouds. Then, in a rare display, he reshaped into human guise. His roar of power silenced the field. A chorus of astonished voices broke the hush. He's here! The Guildmaster has arrived! Every eye swung toward the storm's heart, where Lucian strode through crackling arcs of magic. Tall, resolute, his cobalt blue eyes blazing, he brought with him a palpable aura of confidence. Relief rippled through the fairy tale members. So long as their guildmaster stood with them, no demon or dragon could triumph. Across the field, Mardgeir's lips curled in stunned disbelief. He felt it first in his bones, raw, titanic power radiating from Lucian, power that rivaled his own. His pupils narrowed. This was impossible. Lucian's reputation as Fairy Tale's guildmaster had always been formidable, but even so, his opponents still clung to the hope that they might rival his power. Now, standing before him, that hope evaporated. The leader of the 9 Tartaros demons felt as insignificant as an ant confronting an elephant. Panic unfurled in his chest. "Run!" he shouted. Instinct took over. He launched himself down the street at top speed, his companions hesitating only for a heartbeat before following in his wake. Their most grotesque curses and demonic sorceries paled next to Lucian's overwhelming magic. One demon hissed between ragged breaths. How is he this strong? Not even End Reborn, not even Zareth could match him. Lucian's eyes narrowed. In a calm, resonant voice he commanded, "Time, freeze." In an instant, the world around them stilled. The wind ceased in mid-blow, loose stones hung suspended, and the 9 demons of Tartaros froze solid, mid-flight, somewhere between hope and despair. Seal. Lucian reached into his cloak and withdrew a single rune-etched card. With a flick of his wrist, he sent it hurtling toward the petrified demons. The card burst into shimmering light on contact, binding each of them in chains of arcane energy. As the seal's glow faded, Lucian stood alone in the suddenly silent street, his victory as absolute as it was swift. Lucian raised the enchanted card, and in an instant a brilliant sealing circle bloomed around it. Tendrils of arcane energy snaked outward, then recoiled, sucking the 9 writhing demons into the card's depths. Lucian's card sealing technique, a breakthrough he'd forged by combining Hugh's native card space magic with the Matryoshka sealing art of the magician apprentice world and the arcana of the magic card realm, proved devastatingly effective. All he needed was a fleeting opening. Once his target was drawn inside, escape was virtually impossible unless the captive was also a master of sealing magic. The 9 demons, already outclassed, found their strength, and even Mardgeir's mighty power reduced to nothing against Lucian's iron will. A deep, rumbling voice broke the silence. "You again, Cat? Why do you look so familiar?" From the shadowed corner emerged Acnologia, the black dragon. Scales as dark as a moonless sky rippled with latent magic. He fixed Lucian with a wary glare. Temporal spells held no sway over him, yet the raw potency radiating from this small, feline-formed sorcerer seemed to eclipse even his own legendary might. Doubt flickered in the dragon's crimson eyes. Who, or what, was this remarkable cat? Lucian had already devoured nearly every dragon he'd faced during the Dragon King Festival, and mastered Devour Magic, a power that could nullify any spell. No matter how strong an opponent's magic was, he felt unshakable. What puzzled him now was a nagging sense of familiarity about this creature. He was certain he'd seen it before, but couldn't place where. After all, one doesn't easily forget a being capable of such immense power. He released the time magic that bound the black dragon and met its gaze with a calm smile. "We've met once before, on the northern continent," he said. "At the time, I was hardly worthy of your attention." Years earlier, Lucian had journeyed to the northern continent to learn Dragonslayer magic. While searching for the famed wizard Gildarts, he'd stumbled upon Gildarts locked in battle with this very black dragon. The drake's power had stunned him. Gildarts' full-strength blow hadn't even left a scratch, yet the dragon's casual swipe had cost Gildarts his leg. Lucian knew that, though he'd since grown stronger than Gildarts, he would have been no match for that legendary beast. Lucian stood tall amid the shattered remains of the battlefield, every ounce of his power humming beneath his skin. He fixed the looming black dragon with a steely gaze and spoke, voice calm but ringing with deadly intent. "You're not even worthy of my full attention. Today I'll slay you, and your dragon slayers. If you don't step in my way, I might let you live, but cross me, and you die alongside them." A low, contemptuous rumble rolled from the dragon's chest as it turned its colossal head toward him. Burning ebony eyes swept over Lucian, disdain written in every scale. "Your confidence amuses me, human," the black dragon growled. "Do you truly believe you can challenge me?" Lucian allowed himself a small, cold smile. He flexed his gauntleted hands, revealing razor-sharp, cat-like claws that caught the evening light. "Actually, I came looking for you," he said. "You've been harassing my guild's wizards. That's a line I won't tolerate." At Lucian's words, the dragon's eyes narrowed to slits. With a long, sinister hiss, it replied, "Looking for me? then you're looking for death. Lucian straightened, pointing both claws at the beast's massive chest. If by death you mean the death you've brought upon too many innocents, then yes, today I end you, Scourge. I swear it. The black dragon let out a roar so fierce the ground trembled beneath them, wings unfurled in a terrifying display of power as it reared up on all fours. You misunderstand your fate, puny mage, it thundered. First, I will crush you, then I will hunt down every dragon slayer and every last dragon, and finally I will watch this world burn to ash. With a primal howl, the creature's form rippled and expanded until it stood a full 20 feet tall, its obsidian scales glinting like spilled ink. Then it threw back its head and bellowed two words that echoed across the ruined plain. Black Dragon's Roar. Inside its cavernous throat, dark energy coalesced, crackling with malevolent force. In an instant, the inky blast hurtled toward Lucian, a living storm of destruction determined to obliterate him. Lucian's display of extraordinary power drew no mercy from the black dragon. With a deafening roar that shook the very skies, the beast unleashed every ounce of its strength in a single devastating strike. This was no playful skirmish like the one on Tenru Island. The force behind this attack was easily 100 times greater. Had it reached the ground unopposed, it could have carved a chunk from the map of the eastern continent. Yet Lucian remained unmoved. A radiant mantle of white chi swirled around him, his eyes shining with unbreakable resolve. Stepping forward, he raised his hand and pointed directly at the oncoming pillar of black energy. Chi body source flow, disperse! The instant the two energies met, the destructive column buckled. Shadowy tendrils of darkness unraveled and dissolved into mist, vanishing as if they'd never existed. The valley fell eerily silent, the dragon's roar cut short by the sheer collapse of its power. Lucian lowered his hand and offered the black dragon a confident smile. Magic immunity isn't your exclusive gift, he said, his voice calm yet charged with triumph. I've mastered it too. Chapter 6 and 9, Little Black Dragon? How ridiculous. What? The black dragon's earth-shaking roar, laced with the devouring magic he'd perfected by slaughtering countless dragons, should have incinerated any opponent. Even mighty sorcerers like Zareth, unleashing their most devastating spells, could not harm him. His massive draconic form alone outclassed any humans, and his magic tore through defenses like paper. Yet here stood Lucian, a catfolk mage, and none of that fearsome power fazed him. Fury darkened the dragon's eyes as he unleashed roar after roar, each wave of devouring magic dissolving harmlessly in midair. Fine, he snarled. If my spells won't break you, I'll grind you into pulp with my claws. With a thunderous beat of his wings, he shifted fully into his true form and dove straight at Lucian, talons extended like gleaming black blades. In his mind, the catboy's diminutive frame wouldn't survive a single swipe. But reality was about to prove him very wrong. Lucian's feline form bristled with power. My claws aren't just for show, he growled, muscles swelling as dozens of shadowy clones converged to bolster his strike. Since encountering the 6 treasures immortal thief, he'd absorbed vast reservoirs of strength, and even as a cat, his physical might had grown formidable. With a deafening crash, Lucian's massive paw met the black dragon's talon. A shockwave tore through the sky, buffeting everyone below. Guildmaster! The fairy tale mages cried, scrambling against the gusting wind. But the dragon's claws won out. With a flick of its forelimb, it sheared through Lucian's enlarged paw, snapping off the white-gloved claw in a spray of magical sparks. The young guildmaster skidded backward, fur bristling, wounded but still fierce. Above him, the black dragon hovered, eyes narrowed in astonishment. Just a cat, it muttered, wings folding. Even with giant magic, there's no way. Its voice trailed off, disbelief heavy in the air. Lucian's roar answered, a promise that this battle was far from over. Lucian, the Black Dragon King who had laid waste to tens of thousands of his own kind, possessed the most powerful body ever seen among dragons. No other creature in the world could hope to match him in raw physical might, and yet, just now, when his dragon claw met that of a mere cat, he'd felt genuine resistance. Although he ultimately prevailed, the force behind the cat's swipe reminded him of the fiercest dragon monarchs he had once faced. How could a cat's body be so strong? Lucian's expression betrayed no surprise at having a claw nicked off. Such minor injuries were exactly what he'd been anticipating. After all, he was the world-shattering Black Dragon King, the scourge of his race. Of course, his physique was unassailable. This had been only a preliminary test. He hadn't deployed his healing magic, nor had he activated the dual mastery hands or the 6 treasures immortal thief techniques. Thanks to the self-regenerating properties of the extremis virus coursing through his veins, the lost claw would regrow in moments. And sure enough, less than 5 seconds later, the new claw sprouted, as pristine as the one he had lost. Lucian stood his ground, cat-clawed paw raised in challenge. From the skies above, Acnologia, the dread black dragon, descended with a thunderous roar. "I'll crush your skull," the dragon threatened, voice rumbling like an earthquake. "Let's see how well you heal then. No one dares speak to me this way." His lips curled in a feral sneer. "Better yet, I'll tear you limb from limb and watch you try to stitch yourself back together." For centuries, every living thing had bowed before Acnologia's name. He was the dragon of destruction, the very embodiment of terror, the world's greatest annihilator. All who saw him felt their blood turn to ice, everyone except Lucian. With barely a pause, Acnologia folded his vast emerald wings and plummeted earthward like a black arrow. His claws, each the size of a boulder, snapped forward, eager to rend Lucian in two. But Lucian no longer shrank in fear. He unleashed a roar that split the heavens and shook the battlefield. In a single fluid motion, he shed his feline guise, bones reshaping, wings tearing free from his back. Scales erupted across his skin, muscles bulged, and horns curved into wicked points. "Titan transmutation!" Lucian cried, pouring the world's ancient giant magic through the legendary brand of the magic card world etched on his chest. In that instant, his draconic form ballooned skyward, tens of thousands of meters tall, so immense his head pierced the low clouds. Lightning danced across his ebony scales, and his eyes burned with the fury of a storm. At last, 2 colossal titans faced off on the windswept plain, each the living definition of power incarnate. Lucian's roar echoed across the battlefield. "Pathetic little black dragon!" In a blur of motion, he thrust out a massive claw and snatched Acnologia mid-attack, slamming him into the earth with bone-shattering force. Acnologia measured barely 1,000 meters from snout to tail, but Lucian's dragon form now spanned tens of thousands. One sweeping talon easily dwarfed the black worm's entire body. As Lucian drove his claw deeper, the ground fractured and sank. The onlookers watched in stunned silence as a vast crater formed around Lucian's grip, the sheer weight and strength of his body crushing solid rock into dust. Acnologia thrashed beneath him, black scales glittering with defiance. Though smaller and subdued by Lucian's overwhelming power, the dark dragon refused to yield. Each time Acnologia twisted in Lucian's grasp, the earth shuddered, sending tremors rippling outward. "Roar!" Lucian unleashed a thunderous challenge, his voice rolling like an avalanche. Even now, he could feel Acnologia's fierce resistance, every muscle straining against the grip. But Lucian's form was honed to perfection, his physical might unmatched. With another crushing press of his claw, he drove the black dragon further into the pit, determined to end this duel with undisputed dominance. Lucian braced himself as the black dragon reared back, its jaws parting with a thunderous roar. Before he could react, the beast's roar cracked the earth beneath him. Rock and soil exploded outward, and the dragon surged up through a gaping fissure behind him. Lucian spun on the spot, slashing out with his clawed hand. "Not so easy," he muttered. Undaunted by his failed attempt to end the fight in one blow, Lucian seized the dragon's flank in a vice-like grip. He felt the creature's muscles bunch under his fingers. His own strength exceeded the dragon's, but only marginally. Huge body, blistering speed, he marveled as the black dragon twisted sharply, its scaly hide slipping free of his hold. Facing foes smaller than itself most of the time, the black dragon knew its own disadvantages well. Its massive frame created blind spots, directly behind the head, beneath the wing roots, along the spine, even under its belly. These were places Lucian could strike before the dragon even saw him coming. The other drawback was obvious. Bulk meant slower reflexes. Lucian studied the beast's wary eyes and readied himself, searching for an opening in those hidden zones. If he could exploit even one, he just might turn the battle in his favor. Lucian's size alone didn't slow him down. A truly powerful frame could move as swiftly as a lightning bolt, even a massive one. Think of a kung fu master snatching flies with chopsticks. Speed isn't always sacrificed for strength. What matters more is reaction time, and that's where large creatures often falter. To them, anything small or moving in and out of their sight registers late, and by the time they notice, their instincts are already half a beat behind. That was why Lucian had expected to ambush the black dragon from below, bursting up through the earth behind it. In theory, the beast should never have seen him coming. Yet somehow it did. Swish, swish, swish! Like a giant obsidian mosquito, the dragon evaded Lucian's strikes and counterattacked, darting in from every conceivable angle, its claws and fangs aiming for his vitals. But no matter where it struck, Lucian was always one step ahead. He intercepted every lunge, parried every swipe, then delivered precise ripostes in turn. What the dragon didn't realize was that Lucian's mental projection now spanned several kilometers. Every twitch of its muscles, every shift of its wing, you could say he saw its moves before it even made them, and that gave him the edge he needed to stay alive. And turn the tide of battle. Guildmaster, we're here to help. Natsu roared, launching himself skyward toward the fierce clash between Lucian and the black dragon. Behind him, Urza, Laxus, and the rest surged forward, their battle cries uniting in a single declaration. We are Fairy Tale. Acnologia's great black wings beat against the air as he traded blow after blow with Lucian. From below, Natsu flared with dragonfire, striking at the black dragon's flank. Urza's blade sang through the air, Laxus's lightning crackled, and every fairy tale mage pressed their assault, shouting of friendship, bonds, and justice. But each attack only fueled Acnologia's fury. Snarling at the relentless fly swatters below him, he twisted his massive head around. His eyes blazed as he locked onto Natsu and the other dragon slayers. So you'd challenge me, little vermin? He thundered. I may not beat him. Acnologia spat toward Lucian, but you shall pay for this insolence. With a roar that shook the very sky, the Black Dragon King unleashed a storm of ebony scales and draconic power. Deep down, he knew he couldn't overcome Lucian today. Instead, he resolved to crush the smaller slayers and their foster father, the Fire Dragon King, before retreating to devise a new strategy, and then return for the decisive battle. It felt as though the showdown was about to reach its conclusion. As the Black Dragon swooped in, targeting Natsu and the others, Lucian abandoned all restraint and prepared to unleash his full power. With magic effectively neutralized on both sides, his physical strength in dragon form was on par with the Black Dragon's, but he knew that alone wouldn't guarantee victory. If the Black Dragon chose to flee, pinning him down would be no easy task. Of course, Lucian wasn't relying solely on brute force. He also commanded a personal realm, an 80% complete pocket world that served as his true secret weapon. The difference between a father-level being standing alone and one backed by his own realm, or between a single universe-level entity and one wielding an entire cosmos, was staggering. Come on, then, Lucian growled. He swept his hand through the air, and immediately a jagged obsidian crack erupted before him. Within seconds, it spiderwebbed across the sky, consuming the town below, and threatening to swallow the Black Dragon, Natsu, and the others who hovered above it. Lucian vanished in an instant, slipping into the private pocket dimension he'd created. I told you, you can't fly here, he said, his voice calm as the laws of his little world bent to his will. Outside, the Black Dragon, who had been sweeping down on Natsu and the others, suddenly found his wings useless. With a massive crash, he tore through the ruins of the town and skidded across an empty expanse that stretched into a starless void. He lunged at the air, beating his wings frantically. What is this place? Why can't I rise? His ebony scales rippled with confusion. No spell should have been able to touch him. His devouring magic consumed any hostile enchantment. Yet here he was, grounded as though the very foundations of flight had been stripped away. Some spatial magic, he growled, suppressed my power, but that makes no sense. Lucian didn't bother answering aloud. In his mind, he offered the dragon a simple explanation. This was not a trick of conventional magic, but a realm governed by his own origin power, the primal law that shaped every particle within it. He watched the dragon struggle for a moment longer, then drifted downward like a shadow at dusk. In the boundless silence of his world, he struck, swift, precise, and overwhelming. Natsu and the others, stranded in the real world, could only stare in astonishment as Lucian's avatar delivered blow after blow to the helpless Dragon King. Here in this private cosmos, every rule bowed to Lucian's command, and the Black Dragon, for the first time, would learn just how absolute that power could be. The Black Dragon thrashed at the cracked earth beneath it, its great wings useless, grounded by Lucian's will. It could ne'er take to the sky, its movement reduced to a slow, desperate crawl, and it was hopelessly entangled in Lucian's devouring magic. In the fairy tale world, that magic would have been virtually unstoppable. Here, however, Lucian stood within his own realm of origin laws, and those laws bent the dragon's power to his command. Drawing on the fundamental codes that shaped his world, Lucian bound the Black Dragon's devouring magic, sealing off its strength and imposing rigid restrictions on its every breath and heartbeat. Then, with a voice that carried the weight of unyielding authority, he unleashed a storm of spells all at once. Avada Kedavra, Three-Color Dragon's Roar, Fairy Law, Slumber's Lullaby, 100 billion volts, Sword Control Technique, Magnetic Command. Though each spell was operating at only 1% of its full potential, throttled by the unnatural interplay of two magical systems, the combined fury was more than enough. Blasts of lethal energy, draconic roars, binding oaths of fairy enchantment, and crackling bolts rained down on the beast. Invisible magnetic shackles coiled around its limbs, and a soft, eerie lullaby infiltrated its mind. Under the reinforced origin laws, Lucian's assault tore at the dragon's flesh and spirit, the auxiliary physical suppression compounding its agony. Pinned to the scorched ground, the Black Dragon let out a final, earth-shaking roar of defiance, and then fell silent, subdued at last by the unbreakable will of the young sorcerer Lucian. Even more terrifying was Lucian's forethought. Before entering the small world, he had secretly forged a dozen Dragon Slayer throwing knives, using its unique refining technique. Now, with his mutant powers surging beyond anything he'd known, he channeled magnetic force into each blade. In a flurry of crackling energy, the knives streaked forward like living lightning, cutting through the Black Dragon's iron-hard scales and tearing deep gashes in its hide before the beast could even react. The dragon howled, twisting in agony as blood seeped from dozens of wounds. Seizing the moment, Lucian vaulted onto its massive shoulder and drove a knee into the monster's foreleg, pinning it to the ground. "Final blow," he roared. In midair, the 12 knives converged, their magnetic energies fusing into one blinding spear of light. It struck the dragon's skull with a thunderous crack, one clean shot that left the beast's roar echoing into silence. "6 treasures, immortal thief!" Lucian cried, invoking the world's ancient law. Crimson chi spiraled outward, enveloping the fallen dragon as the 6 treasures immortal thief devoured every fragment of its flesh, bone, and spirit. Within heartbeats, the monstrous essence was fully absorbed into Lucian's own life force. With the ritual complete, his body shrank and blurred. He shifted back into his sleek cat form. Stepping through the shimmering gateway, Lucian rejoined Natsu and the others, who stood frozen in awe at the little black feline now curled contentedly at their feet. Lucian's voice rang out, calm and authoritative. "Restore!" A brilliant wave of magic washed over the shattered streets, restoring the town to its former glory in an instant. Broken walls knitted themselves together, shattered windows reformed, and the scorch marks faded as if they had never existed. Natsu and the others stared in awe, still too stunned to react. Lucian turned to them, expression composed. "I'm going to lay low for a while. The old guildmaster will oversee guild affairs in my absence." Before anyone could protest, he vanished on the spot. Using the 6 treasures immortal thief technique, Lucian had absorbed the Black Dragon's physical essence, yet it would take time to fully integrate its power. He needed the sanctuary of his personal pocket dimension, where no one could disturb him as he completed the process. A month later, Lucian opened his eyes. He lay on the smooth stone floor of his hidden realm, satisfaction evident on his face. The Black Dragon's body had been fully assimilated. His own vitality had surged to new heights, and at will he could now assume the Black Dragon's majestic form. Within the depths of his soul, the Black Dragon's essence had not merely been consumed, but bound and broken by Lucian's soul-restraining technique. From it, he had claimed the unique art of devouring magic. Already, he could feel its power amplifying his ability to absorb both Chaos Force and Phoenix Force in the Marvel Universe, twice as fast as before. Ready at last, Lucian rose to his feet. His transformation awaited, and with it, a new era of power. Lucian paused in the darkness, the sealed cards of the 9 demon gates glowing faintly in his hand. Right, he murmured to himself, I haven't given Mirajane her gifts yet. He didn't want to wait until dawn, so he opened a tiny rift in space and stepped through. In an instant, he was standing beside Mirajane's bed in the guild castle, well past midnight. Before he could even speak, a wave of magic swept through the room. Who's there? Mirajane sprang awake, her eyes flashing. Instinctively, she called on her takeover magic, and in a swirl of shadows she became Satan's soul. Long hair went white, horns curved from her temples, and a wicked tail lashed behind her. Lucian didn't flinch. With a quick step forward, he seized her by the shoulders and gently but firmly pushed her back onto the covers. It's me, he said, slipping back into a casual grin. At the sound of his voice, relief washed over Mirajane's demon form. She was about to shift back to her gentle self when Lucian reached for the blanket and peeled it away. Don't change yet, he said quietly. What I want is you in Satan's soul. Mirajane's red eyes flicked up to his. You asked for this, she purred, her tone playful but commanding. Just don't get cold feet. Every trace of her usual sweetness was gone. As Satan's soul, she was authoritative and bold, everything Mirajane rarely let show. Her tail curled around Lucian's wrist, pulling him closer. With a smooth motion, she rolled on top of him, pinning him against the sheets and giving him a triumphant, teasing smile. Fuyuki City, in the courtyard of a quaint, retro-style home. 17-year-old Lucian stood at the window, staring at the red maple outside, its branches now nothing more than a bare skeleton against the sky. He sighed. If only you were a machine, he murmured. I could use my skills to fix you. 10 years ago, his adoptive father, Kiritsugu Emiya, had rescued him from a fire and planted this very tree as a symbol of new life. But after Kiritsugu's death 5 years ago, the maple had inexplicably begun to wither. Lucian had tried every treatment he knew, fertilizers, pruning, even whispered words of encouragement, but nothing revived it. Today, all that remained was its hollow trunk. Shaking off his disappointment, Lucian moved on with his morning routine. He completed his exercises, washed up, dressed, and stepped into the living room, steeling himself for whatever the day might bring. Lucian sat at the low dining table, bowing his head apologetically. I'm sorry for always asking so much of you, Sakura. From the open kitchen, a girl with soft blue hair and an apron slipped the last bowl of miso soup onto the table. She gave him a warm, reassuring smile. It's no trouble at all, she replied gently. I enjoy helping out. Though she looked like a sister, Sakura Matu wasn't related to him by blood. Lucian's entire family had perished in a fire 10 years ago, and Sakura, now a first year at Homurahara Academy, was the younger sister of one of his former friends, Shinji Matu. After Lucian's falling out with Shinji and his expulsion from the archery club, Sakura had taken it upon herself to visit regularly, lending a hand around the house. Sweet and considerate, she quietly filled the void left by his lost relatives. Good morning, Fuji-ni, Lucian called over his shoulder to the woman seated across from him. She looked up from the newspaper in her hands, a woman he fondly called Fuji, though she wasn't his aunt either. Lucian had met her soon after his adoptive father brought him here, and when that father passed away, she'd stepped in as guardian. She also happened to be his English teacher at school, and, by her own admission, a terrible cook. Every morning, Fuji dropped by for a free meal, her mischievous grin promising more excuses than apologies. Good morning, Lucian, she replied, refolding the paper. Did you sleep well? He smiled, feeling the gentle warmth of two people who'd become the closest thing he had to family. Today, as always, he was home. Morning, Lucian. Taiga Fujimura peered over her morning paper, as if she couldn't care less. Lucian Emiya took a bite of rice, then immediately spat it back into his bowl. Taiga leaped to her feet, triumphant and giggling. How do you like that? I swapped the soy sauce and seasoning labels this morning. Payback for yesterday. Lucian groaned and pressed a hand to his forehead. It's barely dawn, and you're 25. How are you still pulling pranks like a kid? Recovering, he shook his head. All he'd done was slip up and call her by that nickname yesterday, yet here she was, holding a grudge until breakfast. Typical, he thought. Thanks to these unreliable grown-ups, I had to grow up so fast. With that, the three of them, Taiga, Sakura, and Lucian, bickered and laughed their way through breakfast as usual. Taiga revved off on her little electric scooter first, while Sakura and Lucian cleaned the dishes and straightened the kitchen. Together they headed for the door, but just as they were about to step outside, Lucian froze. He glanced back into the courtyard and was stunned by what he saw. Sakura Mato's brow creased with concern. "Is something wrong, senpai?" Shiro Emiya gave her a reassuring smile, then double-checked the lock on the door. "It's nothing. You must have seen things." A moment ago, he'd been convinced the withered red maple out front had swayed of its own accord, almost breathing with life. He dismissed the notion as a trick of the wind. But no sooner had he and Sakura turned to leave than the tree began to stir. Its brittle branches plumped up, its scarlet leaves regained their luster, and in mere seconds it looked healthier than it had in years. More than that, an almost tangible aura of vitality and something unmistakably magical radiated from every fiber of the tree. Then, to Shiro's astonishment, the bark cracked and a human face emerged. A calm, yet surprised voice carried on the breeze. "Well, I didn't expect to take the form of a tree this time." Of course, this red maple wasn't just any tree. It was Lucian's latest clone, newly awakened. Lucian tilted his head and regarded the towering sapling before him. "A tree's just fine," he mused. Even a rock would work at this point. He'd expected human clones from his new ritual, so seeing his latest duplicate emerge as a young oak had caught him off guard, briefly. But with his current command of magic, he could easily transfigure the tree into any form he wished. In fact, the extra boost this new clone granted felt almost trivial these days. In earlier days, having even an ordinary human double at his side would have doubled his physical endurance and strength, an invaluable asset. Now, however, the gains were marginal. What truly mattered to Lucian was mastering the arcane systems of this new world. Here, magic was not a solitary pursuit. It wove together the talents of countless practitioners. By absorbing others' techniques, he could rapidly enhance his own spells. His small world, the inner pocket dimension he cultivated for study and training, would grow stronger and more versatile as well. Still, a tree clone had its distinct advantages in these early stages. A human body endowed with all the abilities of a mature oak, rooted firmly in fertile soil, drawing nutrients and water, even photosynthesizing, would never need to break for meals. That kind of self-sufficiency was pure gold when resources were scarce. Lucian let the sapling's branches sway in the breeze, already envisioning the ways he'd harness its strength. With this arboreal companion at his side, even if only until he reshaped it into a more conventional form, his path to power had just taken an unexpected but most welcome turn. Moreover, large trees are remarkably resilient. If a branch breaks off, it can regrow by the following year. Lucian wasn't sure what sort of world this was. It looked like Japan, but he'd never heard of a place called Fuyuki City. Whispering the words of a transfiguration spell, he shifted out of his tree form and back into his human body. He turned his head, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Once again, he'd arrived in a world he didn't recognize. Over the course of activating countless clones across different realities, Lucian had begun to discern a pattern. Every world he'd visited so far was drawn from some existing story, movies, TV shows, comics, anime, or novels, and each could be slotted into one of three broad categories. The first category comprised Western-inspired realms: the Marvel Universe, Middle-earth, Hogwarts from Harry Potter, the world of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and the mysteries of Arcane. Because he'd devoured those tales in his previous life, he felt most at ease within them. The second category encompassed Japanese story worlds, Academy City, the magical guilds of fairy tale, and the adventures of Cardcaptor Sakura. A third category still eluded him, worlds he had yet to encounter. Lucian had seen many of these worlds as a child, though a few had emerged only after he'd stopped paying attention. Still, by studying their climates, dominant factions, and underlying power systems, he could tell they all shared one thing: a Japan-like setting, complete with fictional place names. This current realm felt no different. He'd also identified a third category among the worlds he knew: domestic story universes. So far, only the Chi refining world had appeared in that group, but every one of these realms had one constant. They were far from ordinary. Magic, whether arcane sorcery or Taoist cultivation, lay at their core. This world isn't familiar yet, he murmured. I shouldn't rush in. Better to watch and learn first. With that, Lucian released his arboreal guise. Bark and branches melted away as he drew his scattered aura into a firm, human shape. He masked every trace of his true power, adopting the appearance of an ordinary passerby. Then, with silent grace, he vaulted the garden wall and broke into a sprint after Shiro Emiya and Sakura Mato, determined not to lose sight of them. Chapter 612, Servant Summoning, Part 2. Lucian paused to reflect on his options. With his current strength, he could easily take to the skies, project his mind over the entire city, and sift through the souls of powerful mages until he uncovered every secret this world had to offer. Yet he chose not to. He wasn't arrogant, he was pragmatic. Yes, he had grown astonishingly powerful, but this new world might still harbor forces beyond his ken. He had no right to assume he could act without consequence or that he already understood every rule at play. A low-profile, methodical approach to gathering information was far wiser. True, he had ample clones at his disposal. Sacrificing one wouldn't cripple him. But why waste resources? Every clone represented potential power yet to be realized. Once Lucian reached the universe tier of cultivation, each clone would serve as its own nascent world, endowed with life and ley lines under his dominion. And in the future, when he merged those worlds, each additional clone would raise his odds of breaking through to the multi-universe rank. So he stood still, breathing evenly, observing this unfamiliar land's rhythm and nuances before making any grand gesture. Patience and prudence would yield far greater rewards than reckless demonstrations of power. In the world of chi refining, once you've gathered all the intelligence and ruled out any danger, you can finally move freely. Lucian decided it was time to tail Wei Gongxi Lang and Jiantong Ying, but at a distance, so he could learn more before venturing elsewhere. He slipped through back alleys and around corners, keeping them always in sight, but never close enough to be noticed. When he'd first awakened inside his maple tree clone, he'd sensed something off about those two high schoolers. Their teacher appeared completely ordinary, yet both students were suffused with magic, only it wasn't the typical arcane flow of blossoming mages. Drawing on his own mental cultivation and deep study of magical law, Lucian detected a second layer of energy, two distinct, powerful fluctuations emanating from within their bodies. He hadn't yet pinned down the exact nature of those auras, but he knew the source had to be exceptional magical artifacts. These weren't your run-of-the-mill charms or factory-forged trinkets. Their law signatures were far too advanced. In fact, at his current chi refining level, Lucian wouldn't even be able to create such items himself. That realization was enough to keep him vigilant and cautious right from the start. Lucian watched with growing interest. The fact that both Wei Gongxi Lang and Jiantong Ying carried high-grade magical artifacts in their very bodies told him they weren't ordinary students. Most likely, they were the true protagonists of this world's unfolding drama. By trailing them, he stood a good chance of uncovering the vital information he needed. And if he was wrong, a few days' detour wouldn't do any harm. When they reached the teaching building, the pair parted ways. Wei Gongxi Lang stepped into the second-year classroom. Jiantong Ying headed for the first-year hall. Lucian issued a quiet command. Thought entity. In an instant, his main spirit doubled down on Wei Gongxi Lang, while a smaller thought entity slipped off after Jiantong Ying. He refused to lose sight of either student. From his vantage point outside the door, Lucian observed Wei Gongxi Lang chatting with classmates and patiently explaining advanced magical theory. Before the morning bell rang, he had already helped half a dozen students with their homework, refusing no one who asked. A genuinely kind soul, it seemed. Lucian tucked away the observation, confident that following these two would yield everything he needed. Lucian couldn't shake the surprise that, despite harboring an extraordinarily powerful magic artifact in his own body, his personal command of magic barely extended beyond fixing broken electronics. Then, one day at school, he detected another true mage in his grade, a girl named Yuan Banlin. Like Lucian, who was essentially a fledgling with a hidden treasure, Yuan Banlin had clearly trained for years. Her spells were precise, her control effortless. Intrigued, Lucian split off a second fragment of his consciousness and sent it to shadow her. All day long, through lectures, lunch breaks, and study halls, the three of them moved about campus as if nothing were out of the ordinary. Lucian, his astral double, and Yuan blended seamlessly with the other students. But once the final bell rang, the atmosphere shifted. Following Yuan Banlin off school grounds, Lucian's probing mind gathered some startling details. She was the sole heir to a vast fortune, yet it seemed she lived entirely alone. That afternoon, he tailed her to an immense, walled-in luxury villa. A quick mental sweep confirmed that every corridor and chamber lay empty. No staff, no family, just the high school girl waiting quietly in the heart of the mansion. Yuan Banlin slipped into the villa and, almost reflexively, tapped the messaging icon on her phone. A draft she'd prepared earlier filled the screen. January 31st through 21 p.m. Hey, tomorrow's the deadline. If you're still dragging your feet, I'll be up a creek. 2 spots remain, swordsman and archer, so summon your servant ASAP to seal your command spell. Of course, if you'd rather sit out the Holy Grail War, that's your call. But if you value your life, you'd better report to the church right away. She hit send with an impatient flick of her thumb and tossed the phone onto a nearby table. I already know what I'm doing. Watching her march toward the basement, Lucian shook his head. Swordsman, archer, servants, command spells, Holy Grail War, the church, he muttered under his breath. Looks like the mage circles here are even more convoluted than back home. In the dimly lit cellar, row upon row of ancient tomes pressed against the walls. Every shelf sagged beneath dusty grimoires bound in cracked leather. Lucian stepped closer, brushing a thick layer of dust from one of the volumes. He drew in a slow breath. A family archive this size must hold some serious secrets. Lucian scanned the vast trove of leather-bound tomes and glittering artifacts spread before him. With an archive like this, the Banlin family must be a long-established magical lineage, he remarked. Banlin nodded. That's the plan. I'll copy every book so you can study them at your own pace. These grimoires held more than mere spells. They chronicled centuries of arcane history, key battles, and vanished schools of magic. As Lucian flipped through pages crowded with elaborate sigils and marginal notes, he began to gauge just how powerful the world's greatest mages had been. Then something on the stone floor caught his eye, an intricately carved circle at the basement's center, its runes faintly luminous. Despite coming from another realm, Lucian's own training let him recognize it immediately, a summoning circle of rare design. Could this be the method they used to call forth a servant? He whispered, recalling the church operative's cryptic warning over the phone. His hunch proved correct when Banlin lifted a small gem, its surface pulsing with her magic. She placed it carefully in the circle's heart. Instantly, the runes flared, and the air crackled with burgeoning power. Lucian watched from the shadows as Elena raised the glowing gem above the carved summoning circle. She whispered to herself, "Time is aligned, frequency stable. Even without an external medium, I can call forth the swordsman you wish to see." She planted the gem at the circle's center and let its magic bleed into the etched runes. Then she intoned clearly, "Silver and iron form this base. O mighty Duke of Stone and Contract, ancestor Shubainao Gu, open every gate. Let all paths converge." At her words, the circle erupted in blinding light. Lucian felt the ground tremble beneath his feet as the runes reached down into the earth, drawing a surge of raw power from some distant core of magic. In that instant, he realized, this wasn't a simple spirit summoning. A living form was coalescing before them, flesh and steel knitting together from pure arcane energy. When the light finally dimmed, a tall figure clad in battered plate mail stood in the villa's grand hall, sword sheathed at his side. Lucian swallowed hard. He had never witnessed a ritual so direct, so potent, pulling both soul and body from another realm in a single stroke. Intrigued, he stepped forward, eager to unravel the secret behind this extraordinary summoning magic. Lucian watched from the staircase as Rin Tosaka darted across the marble floor, her crimson skirt swaying behind her. "Perfect. Without a doubt. I've summoned the strongest swordsman," she cried, though the triumphant note in her voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. She paused at the hearth, where a figure, dressed in red, hair as white as fresh snow, sat casually on the sofa. With a snap of her fingers, Rin invoked her next spell. Duplication Magic Circle, Duplicate. Seizing the moment, Lucian slipped downstairs to the basement. There, amid stacks of dusty tomes, he traced glyphs along an aged grimoire. Duplicate, he murmured, and one by one the library's precious books hovered free of their shelves, forming perfect copies on a nearby table. Satisfied, he carried his newly minted volumes back up to the first floor. By then, Rin had already begun questioning the newcomer. "Are you the saber-class servant?" she asked, peering intently at the youth's slender frame. The white-haired young man shook his head, a small smile curling his lips. "No, I am Archer." Rin's face fell. She'd miscalculated the ritual's timing and ended up summoning the archer she'd least wanted. Lucian folded his arms and listened as they spoke. From their exchange, he gleaned the basics of the ritual. The summoning circle draws a heroic spirit's divided spirit from the throne of heroes to serve its master. These spirits are legendary figures, heroes and demigods plucked from myth, history, and even the future. Yet once called forth, a servant remains only partially under the summoner's sway. Lucian stowed his books and stepped into the room's center. "So," he said quietly, "we have Archer here, and you were expecting Saber?" Rin glanced at the youth, then back to Lucian, her cheeks flushing. "Yes, but I'll adapt. We'll make this work." Archer rose, bow in hand. "Then let us begin." Thus, in the quiet glow of the summoning chamber, master and servant, accidental though their bond might be, prepared to test the limits of their newfound pact. Lucian hovered unseen in the night air, reflecting on what he'd just learned. A master's power over a servant is absolute, but only thrice. With the 3 command seals etched on his right wrist, he can issue irresistible orders. After that, the servant is free of compulsion. In practice, though, servants rarely defy their masters. Both parties share the same goal, victory in the Holy Grail War. What exactly is the Holy Grail War? Lucian had caught only fragments of Rin Tosaka's conversation. All he knew was that 7 masters would face off, that the contest was the magic world's and the church's most eagerly awaited spectacle. "Check your spellbooks," Rin had advised her servant. "You'll find every rule in there." When Rin finished her discourse and slipped away to wash up and sleep, Lucian's astral projection dissolved. He reformed moments later outside the Matu estate, curious to compare notes. From what he'd seen, Sakura Matu's family was every bit as affluent as the Tosakas, only their manor was a traditional courtyard rather than a sleek modern villa. Another ancient lineage, he realized. Powers and prestige neatly concealed behind heavy wooden gates. Silently, he trailed Sakura across the threshold. Inside, at the center of a dimly lit hall, stood an old man whose presence pulsed with raw magical power. Zuken Mato, grandfather to Sakura and Shinji, and the current patriarch of the Mato clan. Lucian's pulse quickened. If the Matus commanded such strength, their chosen master could prove a formidable opponent in the Holy Grail War yet to come. Lucian's brow furrowed as he extended his mental sight across the gathering. Compared to ordinary magi, these so-called powerhouses were mere amateurs. None of them even came close to his strength. So far, he detected no remarkable talents. The only items that truly caught his attention were the law-level artifact concealed within Shiro Emiya's body and the potent magic tool Sakura Mato carried herself. He shifted his focus to the Elder Matu. Probing with precise mental currents, Lucian realized that Zuken Matu's flesh was no longer entirely human. Instead, his body teemed with countless specialized mage worms. Intriguingly, the same parasitic creatures wove themselves through Sakura's form. This had to be the Matu family's signature magecraft. "Have you discovered anything?" Zuken asked, leaning on his twisted cane as he addressed his granddaughter. Sakura Matu quietly shook her head. "No, grandfather." Zuken gave a curt nod. "Very well. Continue your surveillance, and the moment you uncover any link to the Einsburn family, report back immediately." His voice was cold, his gesture dismissive. Sakura exhaled in relief and bowed. Unlike her usual swift departure, however, she remained in the chamber, her posture purposeful and alert. The days when his grandfather sent him to see Shiro Emiya were the happiest of Lucian's life. Finally, he could spend every waking moment at Shiro's side. watching him train, sharing quiet dinners, even stealing looks at him in the morning light. Lucian treasured every second, but he also knew it was a dream he would wake from far too soon. He felt tainted, unworthy of the affection he received, and terrified of what lay ahead. "Grandfather," he said one evening, voice small in the candlelit hall, "I don't want to take part in the Holy Grail War. I don't want to fight or hurt anyone." A tense silence followed, until across the room, Shinji Mato sprang to his feet. As the eldest blood grandson of the Matu family, Shinji had always carried the weight of expectation, yet he'd never even awakened a single magic circuit. Meanwhile, Lucian, the adopted son, possessed remarkable talent, the full power of the Matu lineage, and the rare ability to summon a heroic spirit. Shinji's envy had been simmering for years. "What's that? You can't do it?" Shinji's voice dripped with forced cheer. He shoved himself forward, every bit the proud heir he imagined himself to be. "Fine, then let me go in your place. I'll win the Grail for grandfather and prove I'm worthy of the Matu name." Lucian met Shinji's challenge with a calm he didn't feel. The dream of simply being near Shiro was slipping away, and now he was being pushed into a war he never asked for. Yet if he refused completely, Shinji would march right into a conflict he was utterly unprepared for, and likely perish. Lucian closed his eyes, weighing loyalty, love, and duty, and braced himself for the choice that would decide not only his own fate, but the fate of everyone he cared about. Over the past few years, whenever Shinji felt even the slightest annoyance, he would vent his rage on his adopted sister, kicking her, beating her, even forcing himself on her again and again, to remind her exactly who held real power in the Mato household. "Very well then, Sakura. Prepare the pseudo-vassal codex and transfer control of the heroic spirit," Zuken Mato said, his face as impassive as ever. Sakura and Shinji exchanged startled glances. Neither had expected their grandfather to grant the request so readily. Sakura raised her hands, weaving the incantation. Mana coalesced in the air before her, shaping itself into a thick, leather-bound grimoire blanketed in intricate runes. With steady fingers, she pressed her left command seal into the book's cover, embedding her mark in glowing crimson. No sooner had she done so than a heroic spirit emerged behind Shinji. She was clad head to toe in black leather, her knee-length purple hair undulating as if alive. Her curves were undeniably voluptuous, and the air around her pulsed with an almost hypnotic allure, an intoxicating presence tailored to obey the one who held her codex. "Medusa, remember to treat your brother kindly from now on." Sakura Matu pressed the burn on the back of her hand, etched there by her new command seal, gently into her sleeve as she spoke to the knightly heroic spirit. Medusa's gaze cut coldly to Shinji Mato. She knew that a servant's power depends as much on her master's mana as on her own inherent strength. Sakura's reserves were plentiful enough to let Medusa fight at nearly full capacity. Shinji, on the other hand, possessed no magical talent whatsoever, scarcely enough to fuel even a fraction of her abilities, and his past cruelties only deepened the Gorgon's contempt. Clutching the pseudo-servant contract with unabashed pride, Shinji let out a triumphant laugh. "Ha! Finally I'm a master," he announced, grinning at Sakura. "You must be proud. From now on, I promise to be on my best behavior." "So Sakura Matu is one of them too," Lucian whispered to himself as he crouched in the shadows, eyes fixed on the final moments of the heroic spirit transfer ceremony. Medusa, the very Gorgon of legend, with snakes for hair and a petrifying gaze. Even so, to Lucian, she was little more than a curiosity. In his unleashed state, not even Odin or Zeus could stand against him. What truly captivated him was the arcane method by which mythic beings were summoned as heroic spirits in this holy war. If monsters of legend could be bound to human masters, it was a power worth investigating. Sure enough, the Matu estate was rich in magical lore. Once Sakura Matu had retired for the night, Lucian slipped into their private library. Candlelight flickered across row upon row of grimoires, dusty leather-bound volumes that rivaled and perhaps even exceeded the collection he'd seen at the Tosaka residence. Over the next few hours, he meticulously copied every ritual parchment and treatise he could find. With no pressing obligations for the days ahead, Lucian planned to immerse himself in the arcana of both the Matu and Tosaka libraries. He was certain that, once he'd absorbed their secrets, he would understand the true scope of this world's magic, and wield it as no one else could. Chapter 614, Holy Grail War, Part 2. The next morning, Lucian abandoned his effort to track Shiro Emiya and instead buried himself in the library's magic tomes. One by one, he devoured ancient grimoires and handbooks, and before long, he had pieced together a clear, comprehensive picture of this world's supernatural hierarchy and of the Holy Grail War itself. First, Lucian discovered that humanity wasn't alone on the planet. Though the dominant players were humans and human mages, 3 other races existed: vampires, the phantasmal beasts, and artificial humans. Vampires were few in number and largely kept to themselves. The phantasmal beasts, entities so alien they were often called phantasmal species, had retreated centuries ago to the reverse side of the world, far beyond normal human borders. Artificial humans were products of ancient alchemical experiments, sophisticated, long-lived constructs created by long-dead masters of alchemy. Within the fold of humanity, mages fell into 2 camps: magicians and true magic users. Both wield what we call magecraft, but there was a crucial distinction. Magicians relied on a blend of arcane theory and modern technology, alchemy, chemistry, even advanced electronics, to emulate magical effects. True magic users, by contrast, channeled forces that no machine could replicate. In eras when science and industry were primitive, most practitioners were genuine magic users. As technology advanced, however, their ranks thinned. True magic users became legendary rarities, while magicians, adept at merging sorcery with modern inventions, grew more common. No matter the title, every mage needed an innate magic circuit, an inborn metaphysical pathway to draw on the world's magical energy. Without one, tricks like summoning spirits or weaving mana into fire were impossible. Reading on, Lucian felt the weight of both possibilities and dangers looming in the contest for the Holy Grail. Magic in this world hinges on special circuits embedded within the body. These circuits convert a mage's life force into magical energy, which then fuels their spells and formulas. There are 7 core elements: earth, water, fire, wind, void, illusion, and nothingness. Though these categories differ slightly from those in Lucian's homeworld, they feel neither alien nor unreasonable. What truly distinguishes this realm's magic is the use of attributes, modifiers that lend each element extra versatility. Attach the reinforcement attribute to fire, for instance, and the flames roar with 10-fold intensity. Apply reinforcement to water, and it swells violently, surging with blinding speed. According to the ancient tomes, the greatest sorcerers fight not with brute force, but with pure concepts pitted against one another. Most noble houses' libraries house only treatises on basic principles. Volumes on high-level or arcane magic are rare. Lucian, however, has no need to scour dusty family archives for hidden spells. His own capabilities far surpass the simple formulas found in ordinary collections. Lucian's primary ambition was simple: to uncover new magical principles and refine his own magical system. The chronicles he studied explain the Holy Grail War in painstaking detail, beginning with the Age of Gods, an era when divine beings held sway over the world. This Age of Gods was itself divided into 2 epochs. The first age corresponded roughly to the Jurassic-Cretaceous period. The second age stretched from around 12,000 BC to 4,500 BC. In those distant millennia, gods were not distant brainwashed idols, but living embodiments of natural forces: storm, flame, growth, each entirely independent of human desire or planetary will. Over time, the influence of these primordial deities waned, but the surviving records are frustratingly silent on the specifics of their decline. What is clear is that in their wake, human mages set their sights on the root. In arcane theory, the root is the vortex of origin, the primal source from which all existence flows. To reach it would be to conquer mortality, command every law of nature, even forge new worlds and ascend as a creator god. Driven by that godlike promise, countless adepts undertook perilous experiments, intricate rituals, and cosmic gambits. The Holy Grail War was one of the most elaborate of these endeavors, a grand contest devised to claim the ultimate prize. And now, Lucian prepared to test whether he, too, could wrest the secrets of the root from the shadow of legend. Lucian leaned over the ancient grimoire, his eyes tracing the intricate glyphs and marginalia. Every detail bristled with authority. No common text could boast such exhaustive records. Then it hit him. These pages must have come from two of the three founding clans of the Holy Grail War. Centuries ago, those three families shaped the conflict's very foundation. The Tosaka offered the sacred battleground. The Matu devised the complex rituals that tether heroic spirits to this world, and the Einsburn, masters of alchemy, brought the Grail itself into being. Together, they wove the arcane framework that bound Magus to spirit and spirit to destiny. But time had not been kind. Today, the Tosaka lineage survives only in Rin Tosaka, a high school mage whose talent far outstrips her years. The Matu estate, once a powerhouse of sorcery, has dwindled to two figures: the withered patriarch Zukin, obsessed with forgotten dark arts, and his son Shinji, who, by all accounts, lacks even a spark of magical aptitude. Sakura Matu, born a Tosaka but adopted to carry on the Mato name, now languishes beneath the family's iron thumb. Lucian had observed her pallor and the hollow resignation in her eyes. The Matu household was no gentle foster home. And the Einsburn? Their story reaches back to the Age of Gods, when disciples of the Third Mage mastered alchemy beyond mortal reckoning. Now they exist only as a distant echo, their glory buried beneath layers of history and secrecy. Closing the book, Lucian felt the weight of those vanished legacies and the urgent pull of the war they had set in motion. The Grail War was far from over. Underneath those fading sigils and forgotten rites lay a power waiting to be claimed, and a fate he could no longer ignore. By pure chance, the Einsburn family once succeeded in creating an artificial human of unmatched power, Justiers Lisrich von Einsburn, later honored as the Winter's Saint. Yet that triumph proved impossible to reproduce. No matter how they strained their talents, the mages could never again match her caliber. Centuries slipped by, and the family's scholars, worn down by their own limitations, gradually abandoned the castle, or worse, took their own lives. The few remaining artificial humans, though forsaken by their creators, carried on the Einsburn's vision. In the end, Justice herself sacrificed her physical form, becoming a vast magical circuit entwined with the Earth's ley lines. This living reservoir of mana became known as the Greater Grail. When the Mato family discovered how to tap that boundless energy, their servant summoning circles could finally reach the throne of heroes, unleashing the true Holy Grail War. In each of these legendary conflicts, 7 Mage Masters are chosen to summon servants from the Saber, Lancer, Archer, Rider, Caster, Assassin, and Berserker classes, each vying for the ultimate prize. Chapter 1. The Fifth Holy Grail War. Every century, under the covert supervision of the Church's Holy Office and the Mages Association, 7 Magi are chosen to fight a secret war. Each master summons a heroic spirit, a servant, to hunt down the other 6. The sole survivor claims the Lesser Grail, a vessel powerful enough to call forth the Greater Grail and grant any wish. Yet despite 4 attempts, the ritual has never succeeded. The First Holy Grail War erupted around 1800 AD. Lacking the refined system of command seals that later Magi would employ, masters often failed to control their servants. Infighting among spirits and miscast spells caused the whole ceremony to collapse before it properly began. The Second War, circa 1860 AD, marked the debut of command seals, but the conflict still ended in disaster for reasons lost to history. In the Third War, around 1930 AD, the outbreak of World War II drew human armies into the fray. Amid the chaos, the Lesser Grail was destroyed, rendering the ritual impossible to complete. The Fourth War, near 1990 AD, also concluded in failure. The records offer no clear explanation, only that the Grail's power fizzled once more. Now, it is the year 2000. Lucian, forged by blood, ambition, and the mysteries of sorcery, prepares to join the Fifth Holy Grail War. History may be written in failure, but he swears this time will be different. Lucian tapped his fingertips against the table, speaking more to himself than anyone else. There's no guarantee that winning the Holy Grail War will grant every wish. Let anyone enter the vortex of origin or bestow immortality and complete mastery over the world's laws. He'd been fascinated by the Lesser Grail's promise of limitless wishes, but after studying the records of the last 4 wars, he couldn't suppress a wry smile. All those lofty goals were built on the 3 families' centuries-old conjecture, and none had ever come to fruition. Still, a part of him believed it was worth trying. Even if the ritual failed to produce miracles, it offered tremendous research value. And if, against all odds, it truly did open the vortex of origin, Lucian could learn to command the fundamental forces of reality and potentially elevate his modest realm to the stature of a fully formed universe. At worst, he'd lose nothing. With that in mind, he made his decision. He would join the Holy Grail War and finally discover whether legend could be turned into reality. Lucian surveyed the empty skies and realized that, in this godless age, nothing could stand against him. Even if someone were to summon a genuine god-class heroic spirit, he had nothing to fear. Lucian closed the heavy, leather-bound grimoire with a decisive snap. 7 masters were meant to take part in this Grail War. 6 had already summoned their servants, and only 1 spot remained. But Lucian wasn't about to wait for fate or bureaucracy to decide his entry. He reviewed the intercept of Rin Tosaka's earlier phone call. 5 participants had already completed their rituals, and Rin herself was the 6th. Only the Saber class remained unclaimed. There was only one plausible candidate for that final slot, Shiro Emiya, the adoptive son of Kiritsugu Emiya, who had commanded Saber in the 4th Holy Grail War. Rumor held that Shiro carried a magical object within him, something like a scabbard, that would serve perfectly as a summoning catalyst. With the Motto family's grimoires spread out before him, Lucian weighed his choices. His first, and most straightforward, plan was to seize Shiro's hidden catalyst, reconstruct the summoning circle line by line, and draw Saber to his side. The arcane blueprint was laid out in excruciating detail. Every seal, every incantation, every precisely measured flow of mana. All he needed to do was replicate it flawlessly, and he would stand as the 7th master. Lucian met his own reflection in the darkened window. The Grail War was a contest of wills as much as of power. If Shiro Emiya thought he could be its final participant unchallenged, he was gravely mistaken. With grim resolve, Lucian turned back to the ancient texts, ready to rewrite destiny itself. With Lucian's skill level, he could dissect an unfamiliar spell and deploy it flawlessly in mere minutes. The second tactic he'd uncovered was far more ruthless. Pick a random participant, kill their master, then bind the surviving servant under a new contract, instantly becoming a master yourself. In fact, that exploit lay dormant in the Holy Grail War's rulebook. Only by slaying both master and servant could you completely eliminate a side. A lone survivor, whether master or servant, could simply raise a new servant or form a fresh pact with another mage and re-enter the fray. All the rituals for forging such contracts were catalogued in the Matto family's library. After all, the Mattos had devised the original summoning circle, so they'd collected every related incantation and formula. Their archives were so comprehensive that Sakura Matto once lent one of her servants to her ordinary brother Shinji, temporarily elevating him to master status in the war. Lucian barely had time to ponder this loophole before someone asked, "Is he hurt?" No sooner had the question formed in his mind, he was certain Shiro Emiya must be the 7th master, than Emiya himself strode into the vaulted library. Behind him loomed the combined tomes of the Tosaka and Matto clans, a mountain of arcane secrets waiting to be unraveled. Lucian pressed his forehead against the cool wood of the bench, trying to clear the fog in his mind. Even with his iron will, it had taken him 2 full days to decipher and absorb the teachings of the ancient grimoire. Now, on the evening of the 3rd day, the air in the chamber felt heavy with unease. In the far corner, Shiro Emiya sat slumped against the wall. His face was ashen, his eyes vacant and unfocused. A dark red stain spread across his tunic at the chest, the fabric torn and ragged. Yet when Lucian leaned closer, he found no wound on Shiro's skin. It was as if a spear had pierced him clean through, only to be sealed shut by powerful healing magic. Lucian's heart pounded. He dropped to one knee beside Shiro. "Are you being hunted?" he asked softly. Shiro blinked, struggling to focus. He shook his head. "No, not by anyone I know." His voice was distant, hollow. Before Lucian could press him further, the sliding door at the back of the room shuddered. A sudden chill raced up Lucian's spine. Without warning, a figure streaked through the opening, moving with inhuman speed. The newcomer wore flowing martial robes dyed the color of storm-tossed seas. His every step seemed to hover just above the floor, as he were riding a breeze. In his hand gleamed a deadly red spear, its tip honed to a cruel point. Lucian's breath caught. He'd seen something like it before in Rin Tosaka's summoning circle. But this was no archer. The poised elegance, the weapon choice, the fierce intent in the stranger's eyes, all pointed to a different class. "This is Lancer," Lucian whispered to himself, rising to his feet and drawing on his mana reserves. Across the room, Shiro managed to sit up, his pale face hardening with resolve. Sooner or later, they would have to face this servant, and when that moment came, Lucian vowed they would be ready. Lancer's spear cut through the night sky like lightning. Without a word, the blue-clad youth vaulted from rooftop to rooftop, landing with inhuman precision on the roof above Lucian's home. In the next heartbeat, he drove his weapon down in a brutal arc. Inside, Lucian barely managed to roll out of the way. Heart hammering, he scrambled to his feet, snatching up a rolled parchment from his desk. With a swift gesture, he wove a hastily spoken incantation into the paper, reinforcing its fibers until it felt as solid as wood. He thrust it at his attacker, but Lancer brushed it aside effortlessly and closed the distance in a single stride. A crushing kick sent Lucian flying through his bedroom wall. He slammed into the backyard hard enough to crack the stone path beneath him. Lucian lay on his side for a moment, breath ragged, watching Lancer stride toward him, spear leveled and eyes cold. He forced himself to his feet. "Why are you doing this?" he shouted, voice echoing off the house. "What have I ever done to you?" Confusion and fear tangled in his chest. He'd spent the afternoon cleaning the archery club's dojo at school, nothing more than routine chores, when he'd glimpsed two strangers locked in combat. One had been tall, cloaked in crimson, the other lithe and lethal, wielding that very spear. He remembered the flash of steel, the surge of pain as the spear slid through his side, and then a blur of someone, perhaps a girl, sweeping him away. Waking up, he'd found himself safe but inexplicably healed, the strangers gone without a trace. Thinking the ordeal over, he'd returned home, hoping the bizarre episode was over. Now Lancer was back, determined to finish what he'd started. Lucian's hands shook around the parchment staff. He stared at the silver mist of Lancer's breath in the cold air and steeled himself. "I don't know why you're after me," he said, voice steadier this time, "but I won't go down without a fight." Lancer paused, the moonlight glinting off his spear tip. For an instant, the world held its breath. Then the chase resumed. Lucian skidded to a halt in the courtyard, just as Lancer's spear gleamed under the moonlight. "There's no way around it," Lancer said, voice tight with regret. "I don't want to kill you either, but the rules of the Holy Grail War are absolute. Witnesses must die. I'm sorry, you're simply unlucky." He raised his spear in a show of helplessness. "Believe me, this was never personal." Lucian's heart thudded. He'd assumed Lancer was hunting Shiro Emiya because Emiya was a fellow master. In fact, Lancer was only here to erase anyone who'd seen a servant fight. Lucian hesitated. Should he let this play out, or intervene? He wasn't some paragon of justice, his loyalties usually bent toward self-interest. After all, if Shiro died, Lucian could strip the body for any magical trinket worth having. Still, something stopped him cold. As Lancer crouched for the killing blow, Lucian saw it, a faint crimson sigil blossoming on Shiro's left wrist, the first stirrings of a command seal. At the same moment, in the warehouse beside them, an intricate magic circle flared to life on the dusty floorboards. Someone was about to summon a servant. A surge of opportunity and danger crashed through Lucian's mind. If he let Lancer finish the job, he'd miss any chance to claim that servant for himself. And it was clear, whoever emerged would tip the balance of this war. Lucian drew in a steady breath and squared his shoulders. There was no turning back now. He would save Shiro Emiya and seize whatever power followed. Lucian's breath hitched as he finally confirmed the truth before him. "So you really are the seventh master," he murmured, eyes locked on Shiro Emiya. With cold precision, he centered his thoughts and readied himself. "I'd hoped to finish this quickly, but you've left me no choice." Shiro sprang to his feet and darted for the warehouse door. Lucian, a Lancer-class servant, sighed, hefted his spear, and advanced to end the fight. But in the next instant, a thick branch lashed out from behind, coiling tightly around his right ankle. Before he could react, the world flipped upside down, and he was slammed hard onto the ground. Boom, boom, boom! Shiro froze at the sound. His face shifted from panic to astonishment. "A tree!" A tree spirit? He stared in disbelief at the old maple his adoptive father had once planted. Where it had stood, withered and lame, it now soared tall and verdant. Its limbs writhed like living serpents, snaking around Lucian's spear leg and driving him into the earth again and again. Crimson droplets welled at the corner of the once proud Lancer's mouth as he realized he had badly underestimated his opponent. "Who dares to sneak up and attack me?" Lancer shook his head, trying to clear the stars from his vision after the tree had slammed him more than a dozen times. His crimson-speared tip flared, and in one swift motion he cleaved through the writhing branches that bound him. He rolled to his feet and scanned the clearing warily. Unlike Shiro Emiya, Lancer didn't believe the tree itself was a spirit. He was convinced a mage skilled in plant magic lay hidden nearby, puppeteering the giant oak to strike him down. A soft chuckle drifted from the shadows. "Lancer, you've had the misfortune to cross paths with me," the voice said, "but that spear of yours is most interesting." With a rustle of leaves, the great tree contracted and reshaped itself into a tall young man. Lucian stepped forward, his emerald eyes trained on the red-hot spear in Lancer's hand. Only moments before, Lucian had sent out slender branches strong enough to rend steel, an extension of his own magically enhanced body. Yet Lancer's spear had sliced through them like paper. Clearly, this was no ordinary weapon. Chapter 616. Are you my master? Probably a noble phantasm. Noble phantasms are the legendary armaments of the heroic spirits, said to possess power far beyond what modern mages can muster. When invoked, they manifest the very effects sung of in myth and legend. Because their might springs from the collective imagination of humanity, they're often described as weapons forged from fantasy itself, and they're not limited to swords or spears. A noble phantasm can be a supernatural skill, a mythical artifact, or even a living legend made flesh. As a Lancer-class servant, the elegant spear gripped in his hand is almost certainly the noble phantasm for which he's renowned. In fact, after poring over the arcane tomes of the Yamamoto and Ashbury families, Lucian had already deduced that the hidden scabbard concealed within Shiro Emiya's body must also be a noble phantasm. Given everything Lucian knows about contemporary magecraft, it's inconceivable that ordinary magicians could produce artifacts governed by such inflexible, law-defying principles. Not even his own advanced alchemical skills could replicate that level of supernatural precision. He's become a human. Both Lancer and Shiro Emiya cried out in unison as the gnarled tree before them dissolved into a young man's form. Lancer, who had assumed some hidden mage was animating the forest to ambush him, stared in disbelief. He hadn't expected the tree itself to turn hostile. Could this too be some kind of sorcery? Shiro, standing by the warehouse door, was just as stunned. This was the very sapling he had nurtured, now fully alive and in human shape. If a cat or dog he'd raised suddenly sprouted arms and legs, he might chalk it up to anime logic. Catgirls, dog-girls, even fox spirits were commonplace in his favorite shows. But a tree? Especially one that became a man? Humph, Lancer spat, regaining his composure. Magic tricks or no, you're still the enemy. Take this. He summoned his noble phantasm. Gaybolg's spear began to glow crimson as he charged. But before the deadly point could reach Lucian, Lancer froze, his muscles locking in place. His gaze whipped over to Shiro at the doorway. Shiro met his eyes calmly and raised a hand. Wait. Seconds ticked by in silence. Finally, Lancer let the glowing spear drift to the ground. The tension in his posture eased just enough for Shiro to step forward into the warehouse. Lucian, the living tree, standing between them. Lucian ran a hand through his leafy hair, surveying the two warriors with curious, emerald-green eyes. Humans, you are fascinating creatures, he murmured. Shiro inclined his head respectfully. Lucian, welcome back. I'm glad you've awakened. Lancer snorted, propping his Gaybolg on his shoulder. Awakened or not, I'm still watching you. Don't think that changes anything. A faint smile crossed Shiro's face. As long as you're on our side, Lancer, I'm sure we can work something out. With that, the three stood poised at the threshold of the warehouse, an unlikely trio bound by destiny, ready for whatever came next. Lucian appeared at the warehouse's open doorway just as the final strokes of the summoning circle flared to life on the concrete floor. Shiro Emiya's left hand bore 3 glowing crimson seals. their light pulsing in perfect sync with the arcane symbols beneath him. He was about to complete Saber's master's contract, and Lancer, bound by honor and duty as a heroic spirit, would not allow it. With a roar, Lancer reversed his grip on his red, spear-like weapon and launched himself forward, aiming a killing thrust at Shiro. The young mage staggered back in shock, dropping to one knee as the spearhead descended. "You are the seventh master. Die here!" At that critical moment, Lucian swept into view with a crackle of golden energy. He raised one hand and whispered the words of an ancient incantation, the Golden Light Spell. A shimmering blade of pure radiance leapt from his fingertip and intercepted Lancer's spear, a hair's breadth from Shiro's throat. The impact sent Lancer skidding across the polished floor. Lancer sprang back to his feet, eyes widening at the unanticipated defense. In a fluid motion, he whirled the spear and unleashed a flurry of phantom duplicates that streaked toward Lucian's vital points with lethal intent. But Lucian did not flinch. He stood perfectly still, his focus absolute. As each spectral spear accelerated, Lucian adjusted his stance, catching blade after blade on that same luminous ray of golden light until every projection clanged harmlessly aside. When the last echo cleared, Lucian lowered his hand and the radiance faded. He offered Shiro a brief nod, then squared off against Lancer. The servant's crimson eyes burned with renewed fervor, while Lucian's cool, confident gaze met them without hesitation. The Holy Grail War had only just begun, and already its first duel was more dangerous than either of them could have anticipated. How can a mage's body be this strong? Lancer, Cuchulainn himself, descendant of Celtic demigods, could only gape in astonishment. Every one of his full-force spear strikes was stopped dead by a single finger. Reluctantly, he withdrew his weapon and fell back to the center of the courtyard, eyes wide with uncertainty. He had expected to intimidate a mere human magician, not find himself outmatched in raw physical power. And so this opponent wasn't even using magic, just brute strength, speed, and reflexes that surpassed his own. A sudden flash of brilliant light erupted from the summoning circle inside the warehouse. The ritual was complete. Cuchulainn tensed, warily eyeing the skies above. Battling this magician alone was already a headache. If Saber appeared to aid him, the situation would grow even more perilous. Lucian watched calmly, curiosity flickering in his gaze. He'd heard that Rin Tosaka's prize saber was formidable. Now he wondered exactly what kind of servant she'd summoned. Behind him, Shiro Emiya remained frozen in stunned silence, still struggling to process the display of power. The stage was set. Soon, the true test would begin. Lucian was nothing more than an apprentice magician. His only real skill was a few simple repair spells his adoptive father had taught him for fixing broken appliances. He knew next to nothing about the magical world, let alone the intricacies of the Holy Grail War. As the summoning ritual unfolded inside the warehouse, he saw his chance, slipped away, and crouched behind a huge boulder just outside the building. He wasn't running out of fear. His meager abilities would have done Mapletree no good. In fact, getting in the way might cost his savior dearly. If Mapletree were overwhelmed, Lucian would have charged back into the fray without hesitation. But right now, the odds were clearly in Mapletree's favor. His only sensible option was to stay hidden, let the battle conclude, and then emerge to learn what had happened. The brilliant light of the magic circle finally faded, softening into the dusky evening air. A moment later, the warehouse door creaked open. Lucian's breath caught as a young woman stepped out, no older than 15 or 16, clad in polished armor over a long flowing skirt. Her hair was the color of rippling gold, and a single lock sprung upward from the crown of her head. Her eyes, the green of fresh spring leaves, scanned the surroundings with a serious, almost regal expression. Lucian pressed himself flatter against the rock. Whoever she was, this girl had just been summoned, and if she'd faced Mapletree inside and lived, she must be formidable. He waited, heart pounding, for her next move. Lucian scanned the clearing, first catching sight of the Lancer. The red-haired man before him was clearly a heroic spirit, just like the newly summoned warrior standing at his side. He then turned his attention to the young woman who'd materialized beside him. She was shaking slightly, her silver armor glinting in the late afternoon light. With wide, uncertain eyes, she stepped forward and asked, Are you my master?" Lucian allowed himself a small smile. Not yet, eyed, nodding toward a crouched figure, half hidden behind a boulder. He is the one who summoned you. From behind the rock, Shiro Emiya poked his head out, blinking as though he'd just realized something important. His eyes flicked from Saber's silver breastplate to Lucian's calm countenance, then back again. Saber's out already? Trouble. I suppose there's no choice. I'll have to finish off that Magus first, then deal with Saber and her master. As Shiro drew a deep breath of resolve, the atmosphere shifted. Lancer, Cuchulainn, leaned forward and drew up a red glow around his spear. His entire body seemed to hum with power, as though he were channeling an immutable law through that weapon. The very air around the spearhead began to warp and crackle with energy. Lucian's eyes narrowed. Intriguing, he murmured, admiring the Lancer's surge of mana. In the next instant, he raised his right hand and muttered a single word of power. A dark, metallic shimmer sprang up around him in an instant, an arc of unbreakable iron. The iron armor curse formed a second skin over his body, each plate interlocking seamlessly with the next. Lancer's spear thrust forward in a blur, the tip wreathed in crimson light. But where it met Lucian's shield, the impact rang out like ringing steel on steel, and the spear splintered into sparks, unable to penetrate the iron barrier. Lucian stood firm, every breath steady, as the force of the blow reverberated through his enchanted armor. He allowed himself a brief nod of satisfaction. The battle had only just begun. Lancer Cuchulainn's eyes gleamed with cruel confidence. Your defenses are meaningless. I will claim your heart. He unleashed the full power of his noble phantasm, an attack that turns causality itself against its target. Gaybolg, barbed spear that pierces with death's inevitability. A crimson shaft of energy erupted from the spear, swallowing Lucian's iron armor curse as though it were nothing more than fog. The golden radiant spell shattered under its weight, and even Lucian's formidable physique could not withstand the onslaught. With a single, inexorable thrust, Gaybolg pierced straight through Lucian's chest. Chapter 617. What a terrifying magician. Curse? No. It's the Gaybolg, the barbed spear of death that reverses cause and effect. You, child of light from Ireland. At the instant she recognized his technique, the swordswoman, herself a heroic spirit, realized exactly who stood before her. In the Holy Grail War, there's an unspoken rule: never let your identity be known too soon. Once your true name is revealed, opponents can look up your legend, deduce your noble phantasm's strengths and weaknesses, and craft a countermeasure. Since heroic spirits are summoned from different eras, they rarely know one another, unless they've clashed in a previous Grail War. I've been seen through. Cuchulainn clicked his tongue and retracted his spear. No matter. No one can escape this weapon. I'll send both of you off, one less competitor for me to worry about. Exposed and all, he showed not a shred of concern. Lucian braced himself, every bit as confident in his own strength and skill as he'd been moments ago. After all, hadn't his spear just dispatched that powerful magus? Mr. Maple, are you all right? Came Shiro Emiya's urgent shout. Before anyone could answer, Shiro had already yanked up a thick, reinforced branch from the ground and surged forward. He knew he stood little chance against the Lancer in direct combat, but he would not abandon the man who had saved him. But another challenger intervened, stepping coolly between Shiro and the heavily armed spearman. Shiro, take Mr. Maple to the side. Tend to his wound first. Leave this Lancer to me. Shiro froze as the swordswoman faced down their foe. Calmly, she clasped her hands, and an ethereal, long sword, soundless, weightless, materialized in her grasp. The weapon shimmered with the promise of lethal precision. Clearly, if this Lancer intended to eliminate her here, she would preempt him. Lucian, or Mr. Maple, as Shiro still called him, wrestled to sit up, the spear's haft still protruding from his chest. I can manage, he insisted, voice strained but steady. You two should. His lips twisted into a wry grin. Back off and let me handle this. Otherwise, people will think we're ganging up on him. The tension crackled as the swordswoman raised her phantom blade. Steel seemed unnecessary. Her skill alone was enough to threaten even a Lancer-class servant. Shiro knelt at Lucian's side, tearing cloth from his sleeve to staunch the bleeding and murmuring reassurances. Before the first clash of steel and spirit could ring out, a leisurely voice drifted through the unrest. Mr. Maple. All three froze. The stillness grew heavier than any blade. Lucian inhaled sharply, staring at the newcomer's silhouette in the dusky light. Whatever game was unfolding here, it was far from over, and as his sharp eyes tracked the newcomer's approach, he realized that this battle line had only just begun to form. "Are you all right?" Shiro Emiya's voice wavered as he stared at the gaping wound in Lucian's chest, only now he watched in stunned silence as the flesh wove itself back together. "No way, I saw the spear go right through him," Shiro blurted, disbelief etched on his face. Beside him, the swordswoman took a wary step back. Cuchulainn, spear still raised, blinked as Lucian's torso smoothed over. His eyes narrowed. "I apologize," he said slowly, "but I'm a tree. Trees don't have hearts. All you did was pierce bark and wood." Lucian advanced 2 paces, a calm smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he gestured toward the lancer. "Is that really it? Show me what other tricks you've got." Cuchulainn's spear had been empowered by the very principle of causality, a technique meant to seal instant death. It cleaved through Lucian's clone as if no barrier existed. But that strike, however lethal in intent, was nothing more than a physical wound, harmless to a living tree. Even if the replica adopted a human shape, a shattered heart would never kill him. At worst, his body would disintegrate into cells, only to knit itself back together moments later, thanks to Lucian's extraordinary regenerative magic. Short of obliterating or sealing his soul, he was effectively immortal. Lucian cocked his head, his smile widening. "So yes, I really am just a tree. Humph, my master's a coward. He'll pull me back with command spells the moment this trick fails. Looks like I'll have to clean you up next time." Cuchulainn sheathed his spear and leaped onto the rooftop. "Running away?" he taunted. The swordswoman narrowed her eyes at him, but Cuchulainn merely turned, his voice icy. "Running away? Hardly. I'm just stepping back for now, but if you follow me, be ready to die." With that, he sprang off the roof, only to slam headfirst into something invisible. There was a crack like shattering glass, and he tumbled back into the courtyard, dazed. "What's this?" he groaned, sitting up and rubbing his forehead in confusion. From the shadows, Lucian emerged, a faint smile on his lips. "Sorry about that. I just erected a barrier around the yard. Without my leave, no one sets foot beyond this yard." "Then you've chosen death," Cuchulainn snarled. "And I'll grant your wish." He poured every ounce of his mana into his crimson spear, vaulted into the air, and locked into his signature throwing stance. "You're rooted like a tree, no mortal weak point to pierce. Very well, I'll simply annihilate you whole. Die, Gaybolg, alternative form." Normally, Gaybolg's primary function was a guaranteed strike, an attack woven through causality itself. But that version demanded time to wind up, an unbroken stance and close range. Against foes who could regenerate any wound, or those for whom a single fatal thrust was meaningless, Cuchulainn unleashed the noble phantasm's ultimate variation. In this fearsome mode, the spear's power shifted from a pinpoint assault to city-shattering devastation. The trade-off was total mana exhaustion. High above the courtyard, the red shaft of pure energy roared as it accelerated toward Lucian below. Lucian's heart hammered in his chest as he stared up at the falling spear. There was no time to dodge, not in an open yard with walls that barred escape. All he could do was steel himself for the impact. The air tore apart around him as Gaybolg, alternative form, descended like a second sun, promising nothing but utter destruction. A wave of oppressive power rolled off the lancer's red spear, and the swordswoman beside Lucian stiffened. She tightened her grip on her crystalline longsword, ready to dart forward the moment Lucian failed to block. Even Shiro Emiya, the young magus apprentice, could only stare, paralyzed, as the aura washed over him. But Lucian didn't flinch. He tilted his head and gave a small shake. For all the lance's terrifying force, its causality-bound sure-hit enchantment was trivial to him. He'd studied techniques far deadlier and more precise. With a calm voice that cut through the noise of the battlefield, he said, "Stop." At once, the spear froze in midair as if pinned by an invisible barrier. The crimson energy coursing up its shaft sputtered, then vanished entirely. Lucian's eyes were cool and remote as he surveyed the stunned lancer. "That's all you have?" he asked softly. "Then let's finish this." Before anyone could react, Lucian snatched the spear from its battered wielder. In the blink of an eye, he teleported behind the lancer, so fast that the only trace left was the fighter's whispered gasp of surprise. Somewhere nearby, the clash of newly arriving masters and heroic spirits grew louder. But for now, the outcome was decided. Lucian held the red spear firmly in hand, and Lancer had nowhere left to run. Stupefy! Lucian's enhanced Stupefy blast slammed into the Lancer, dragging him instantly into a pocket dimension of Lucian's design. The Crimson Spear, while a noble phantasm, was still forged of metal, and metal answered to Lucian's every command. The tremendous aura that once crackled over the weapon vanished the moment Lucian activated his key body source flow and devouring magic. Energy-based strikes simply couldn't touch him. A chill ran down the female swordswoman's spine. What a terrifying magus! She watched, barely believing her eyes, as Lucian neutralized the Lancer's onslaught, knocking him unconscious and banishing him to that unseen realm, all with almost casual ease. Internally, she couldn't help but exhale in admiration. Had she faced those two deadly moves without knowing exactly what she was up against, she'd have been hard-pressed to survive them. Chapter 618, How About I Be the Master? Second update. Mr. Maple, are you all right? Shiro Emiya exhaled in relief as Lucian Maple touched down lightly after neutralizing the Lancer who had stormed the courtyard. Before Shiro could ask what had just happened, the mansion's gate slammed open, and two figures, a young woman and a young man, hurried inside. "What are you doing here?" Shiro blurted out, startled to see his classmate at the scene. The girl in question, Rin Tosaka, vice president of the student council and one of the school's most admired students, gave Shiro a cool glance. Although they attended the same classes, they'd never been close. His friend Issei Ryudo, the student council president, had warned him to keep his distance or risk causing a scandal. "The second heroic spirit, he's mine to handle," Rin announced, her voice ringing out. At her side stood a white-haired, red-clad man whose calm, watchful gaze marked him unmistakably as a summoned servant. As soon as the swordswoman who had attacked Lucian realized she was outmatched, she lunged at Rin, swinging a translucent longsword in a deadly arc. The archer-class servant didn't hesitate. Two silver daggers materialized in his hands, clashing against the blade and sending sparks flying. "Enough! Stop! Don't fight!" Shiro shouted, stepping forward between them, desperate to prevent the feud from spiraling out of control. "Can someone explain what's going on here?" Shiro Emiya sprang between them, halting Rin and Archer before their clash could escalate. Rin pressed a hand to her forehead in exasperation. "Of all people, why does the seventh master have to be you?" "Well, Shiro, it looks like you're still green at this." She shot him a wry smile. "Good evening, though." "Good evening, Rin," Shiro murmured, cheeks reddening. He turned toward Lucian, the stranger standing off to the side. Restore to original state." At Shiro's command, Lucian swept his hand in a graceful arc. In an instant, the court, pockmarked and scarred by the brief skirmish, healed itself. Splintered wood knit, upturned stones righted, loose earth smoothed. Rin and Archer froze, eyes widening. Rin's voice dropped to a whisper. "What kind of mage can do that? I've never seen restoration magic on such a scale." Archer glanced from the flawless courtyard back to Lucian, curiosity replacing caution. "Who is he?" Shiro glanced uncertainly at Lucian, then back to the two servants. "He's Mr. Maple. He was my maple tree." Rin's brow furrowed. Archer cocked his head. Neither spoke, but the question hung in the air. How could a simple tree become a man and wield powerful magic to boot? Shiro swallowed, searching for words. After a pause, he could only shrug helplessly, hoping they'd accept the impossible answer, for now. Rin Tosaka pressed a cool hand to Lucian Emiya's forehead. "Lucian, what are you talking about?" He lay on the cold floor of the old dojo, muttering fragments of half-formed thoughts. There was no fever, so why the delirium? Tonight had begun like any other investigation into the recent student disappearances at the academy. Rin had uncovered a vile, soul-devouring barrier hidden somewhere on campus, an enchantment powerful enough to corrode flesh and siphon life itself. No sooner had she pieced together its location than Lancer appeared, spear in hand, intent on protecting his master's scheme. While Archer engaged Lancer in a deadly duel, Lucian happened to be returning from late-night practice in the archery range. He'd stumbled onto their fight and paid the price. Lancer's blade had pierced Lucian's heart clean through. Against all odds, Lucian hadn't died on the spot. With his life hanging by the finest of threads, Rin drew upon her father's ruby, a heart-healing jewel passed down through the Tosaka line. The ruby's deep crimson glow washed over Lucian's wound, knitting torn flesh and restoring his failing heartbeat. Now, having summoned every last ounce of magical energy, Rin watched anxiously as his chest rose and fell. "Stay with me, Lucian," she murmured, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. His breathing was steadying, but his words were still tangled in confusion. Rin's thoughts drifted back to years before when she'd first seen Lucian. She'd been on council business at the very same school both he and Sakura attended. On that sunny afternoon, she'd passed the athletic field and glimpsed a wiry boy vaulting over the high-jump bar with effortless grace. Even then, his determination had been unmistakable. Little did she imagine just how dangerously intertwined their paths would become. Now, with the soul-eating barrier threatening countless lives and a master yet to reveal himself, Rin knew that Lucian's survival, frail though it was, might turn the tide in the battles to come. Rin Tosaka had been watching Shiro Emiya for some time. His relentless drive to push himself beyond every limit impressed her deeply, and when she noticed her younger sister Sakura blushing every time Shiro's name came up, she knew she couldn't ignore him any longer. Sure enough, she'd sensed that Lancer might still be hunting Shiro, and right away she'd summoned Archer to back him up. "All right," Rin said quietly one evening in her bedroom. "Tell me exactly what happened tonight at school." Shiro ran a hand through his hair, looking half embarrassed, half anxious. "You might think I'm making this up," he began, "but Lancer really did stab me in the courtyard. Then things got complicated." He explained how the enchanted maple tree he'd been nurturing suddenly transformed into a man, who introduced himself as Lucian, and how Lucian single-handedly drove Lancer off. He described the flash of the summoning circle, the arrival of Archer, and the skirmish that ended with Lancer retreating. Out of everyone involved, the person Shiro trusted most was Rin. Lucian had only emerged from the tree minutes ago, and Archer had appeared just as suddenly. Rin, by contrast, had been his classmate and the student council vice president since middle school. They knew each other, even if they'd never been particularly close. Rin's green eyes went wide. She stared at Shiro, then at Lucian, standing patiently behind him. "You're saying the very tree you planted grew into a man, and that man beat Lancer?" Her voice was a mixture of awe and disbelief. But despite how absurd it sounded, Shiro's earnest expression left her no choice but to believe every extraordinary word. Rin's intuition insisted Shiro wasn't lying, yet her mind rebelled at the very thought. Lancer, a servant famed as one of the 7 classes' greatest champions in direct combat, was better known as the Child of Light of Ireland. How could such a legend be felled by a red maple tree? And not just any tree, but one Shiro himself had planted 10 years ago? She rose, unable to stay in place. "Let's take this discussion into the living room," Shiro suggested, leading the way. "Please, everyone have a seat. We'll talk it through over tea." In the center of the room sat Lucian, already relaxed in an armchair as if he'd been expecting them. "I'll make us some tea," he offered, rising with a casual ease. Before Shiro could protest that they'd brought their own leaves, Lucian swept his hand through the air. In an instant, several porcelain cups appeared on the table, each filled with fragrant, steaming tea. "There, no need to worry about preparation." Rin's eyes went wide. Magic like that, she thought. As sole heir of the Tosaka clan, she prided herself on her extensive knowledge of magecraft, yet Lucian's effortless conjuration flouted every rule she'd ever learned. She leaned forward, curiosity and caution warring in her gaze. Lucian waved his hand, and the shattered beams of the cottage reknit themselves as though an invisible tailor had stitched them clean. A second gesture produced a steaming cup of tea. No spoken words, no glowing runes adorning the floor. To any experienced mage, it must have looked like a simple parlor trick. Across from him, Rin Tosaka watched with cool curiosity. She settled into her chair and began in a steady, measured tone. "All right, let me bring you up to speed. This is the 5th Holy Grail War, a ritual that summons powerful heroic spirits and pits their masters against one another. You, Lucian Maxwell, are the 7th and final master to enter this war." Lucian took a careful sip of tea, furrowing his brow. "I'm sorry, But I still don't understand. If you need a real magician, I'm hardly it. I only studied the basics under my father. You could. I know you're not a professional mage, Rin interrupted, folding her hands. But 6 masters and their servants have already fallen. The survivors are closing in on the Grail, and every death brings us one step closer to its legendary wish-granting power, if it even works, as the legends say. He set his cup down harder than he intended. Since childhood, Lucian had vowed to uphold justice, an oath taught him by his adoptive father. A war that demanded 6 murders in order to fulfill a wish struck him as utterly twisted. Do we really have to kill the masters, he asked. Can't we just overwhelm their servants, break the contract, and leave the masters unharmed? Rin exhaled slowly. In theory, yes. If you resolve a servant, their master is disqualified. But heroic spirits are far stronger than ordinary mages. Facing them head-on is a suicide mission for most casters. Striking the master's soul is, disturbingly, the more efficient method. Lucian stared at the cup before him, its steam curling away into the dim light. He'd never imagined his life could come to this, a battle where the only path to victory ran red with blood. Yet now that he knew the rules, there was no turning back. With a steadying breath, he met Rin's calm gaze. Then show me what I need to do. Rin Tosaka leaned forward, her tone matter-of-fact. Even if your heroic spirit is slain, as long as you still have at least one command spell left, you can summon a new heroic spirit to keep fighting in the war. Shiro Emiya's eyes lit up. So if I expend all 3 command spells at once, I'd forfeit my status as master? Lucian, who had remained silent until now, cleared his throat. If you're really willing to give up your mastership, why not transfer it to me? I must admit, I'm quite intrigued by this Holy Grail war.